Welcome, one and all, to the Minds of the Ecclesia panel. I am your host, Leaky Water Kai, and with me, my amazing guest, FairyQueen. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi everyone. So I like to say I'm an attempted streamer, which is true. I apologize for the false go live alert on my end. Unfortunately, my itty bitty computer, you'll notice I'm not camming up today. Things are not really set up right now. The full operation has not been completed, so I appreciate your patience. I have described myself as more of a conservative liberal. And what I mean by that is like I tend to have liberal positions, but I tend to be more personally conservative around like some social issues. I've kind of flipped a little bit over the years. I feel like if you had asked me maybe 10 years ago, or I probably would have said that I was socially more liberal and I was fiscally more conservative. As time has gone on, those two, I've sort of shifted the opposite way, which is that I feel more socially conservative as I've grown older, but I also feel more socially liberal as I've gone older. So it's a sort of socially liberal, fiscally liberal. So it's kind of weirdly shifted into two different places for me. I describe myself as a feminist. I don't know everything. I welcome people who know more than I do, but I mean that's how I describe myself at least. So yeah.
Awesome. Like I was about to say, you sound like black people, like socially
Oh,
conservative and fiscally liberal, which is just so
do
odd.
I really? It does feel odd for me, but it does feel to me that like it would be best if things were this way. If people were able to take personal responsibility for themselves and for their families and to try to live according to a set of values, but we still have a robust, social welfare program to help people like when they fall. But I don't think that you can have. I don't think that you can have it both ways. I don't think that you can have
I'm getting a
be
weird
fiscally liberal
clip
and
on
socially
your
liberal.
mic.
Oh, there's a weird clip on my mic.
Yeah, not sure what that is. It could be the
Okay.
connection. I'm not sure. It's like a little staticky,
Okay.
and
How
I
about
don't
that?
hear,
Is that better?
and I don't hear it anymore.
You don't hear it anymore? Okay,
Yep.
perfect. Yeah.
So I've been involved in, well, I've been listening to and was involved in a couple conversations recently, and Andrew Wilson happened to pop up in at least two of them,
Hmm.
where they were talking about traditional gender roles and should we have traditional gender roles and the whole deal. And as I'm looking through the news, I see that the Trump administration is looking at $5,000 baby bonus to incentivize public to have more children.
Hmm.
And for the most part, when it came down to the gender roles conversation from the conservative end of it, is women need to have more babies. That's the gender role. Like nothing else really seemed to take up as much of the airtime as, well, people should be having more babies. Like, what do you
Hmm.
think?
So I think a couple of things. So I think that there's a lot of fear mongering about the birth rate that you'll hear from people like Andrew Wilson and people that are kind of, I'm going to say tilt more conservative, but they're really like more alt right. Like there are lots of normal Republicans who do not talk like this and who do not, even think to bring up the birth rate, right? This is really like a kind of a niche like group or bag of Republicans that we're talking about, or not even Republicans, but far right conservatives. Um, and normally, like when you're in these conversations, a couple of talking points are usually brought up. The first is South Korea. So they'll talk about plummeting birth rates in South Korea. That's always something that's brought up. The second thing that's brought up is because the usual response that people have when they talk about we're not having enough babies, we're not giving birth to enough people to meet replacement rate. And the typical liberal response to this is, well, but we'll just have immigration. Like why we don't need to have like women having tons of babies to replenish the workforce if you can simply have an open door policy to allow immigrants into your society, into your country. And the response that you'll typically get from Andrew Wilson or from a lot of these people is, okay, but if you do that, right, in about 50 years, your population is going to be majority Muslim, right? And the reason the edge of that is to basically say that this is a cudgel to women's rights. You have a group of people who come from countries where they are not as supportive of women's equality, women's ability to wear what they want, to work, to receive to receive education. And these are the people that are going to come in to fill in the shoes, of all of the people that aren't working. Like, this is typically how the conversation goes. And one, I think it's kind of a very easily disprovable lie, for the simple reason that if you look at Pew Research, if you look at most stats, it is true that we are going to see the Muslim population, immigrant population, double in the United States. But the last stat that I checked, you know what it's going to double to? From like 1% to 2%.
Yeah.
It's not going to be, yeah, it's going to be more, it's definitely going to increase, but it's not going to increase to near to increase, only to the decrease. It seems that the majority of people of the immigrant population that's going to come into the United States is going to be largely, people say, largely, and no surprise, it's going to be largely Hispanic, largely Mexican Hispanics, largely people from South America. And if you are somebody who is a more, I don't know, who's more of a Christian, who's more of a conservative Christian, think about what these countries are. These are largely Catholic countries. These are countries, that do have a foundation in Christianity. If that's something that's important to you, I mean, these are the people that are coming, right? It's not going to be a majority Muslim population anyway. So like, that's the first thing. But I kind of find this to be the main thing that people are talking about. Here's the curveball to that conversation I've heard nobody bring up. And that's the impact that AI and that the fourth industrial revolution is going to have on the workforce, and how that's going to collide with this conversation about the birth rate. The biggest argument about why we need to have tons of people and tons of babies to replace, workers, to make sure to replenish the workforce, is that there's an assumption that these jobs are going to be stable and are still going to be here by 2050. That in 50 years, by the time, this, and they're just not. They're not going, lots of people are going to lose a ton of their jobs. Like, a ton of jobs are simply going to go the way of the dodo. It kind of feels like we're living in an Isaac Asimov, novel in a way. And it's kind of ridiculous, when you hear people say, but who will drive the trucks? But who will drive the taxi cabs? Who will pick the crops? Who will work in the factories? And it's kind of hard to hear some of this, because the answer is, to a certain extent, yes, it's going to be an immigrant population, and yes, it's going to be working Americans, but a lot of it is going to be automated. Your taxi cab, your Uber, your semi-truckers, that's going the way of the dodo. I mean, that's going to be, the horse, carriage, and buggy, pretty soon. We're going to see a lot of automation. We're going to see a lot of jobs that are going to be sucked up from AI, even jobs that aren't going to completely go away because of AI. Most of it's going to be replaced. I've heard of McDonald's, of restaurants. Like, imagine going to a McDonald's or going to a fast food, restaurant. And people are already doing this. They already did this in Bojangles in the South. You can go, and the person speaking to you, like, asking you, can I take your order? It's an AI bot, Imagine if you had an entire restaurant where the cooking, the delivery, and the voice talking to you, it was all an automated AI person, and you just had one human being in the entire shop to basically make sure that everything was properly automated and modulated towards you. I mean, this is the future that we're headed towards. Anyone saying that, and the real response that you could have to that, okay, but how many jobs are we going to lose, right? Like, are we going to, like, with the supplement of AI, with the supplement of new technology, of people losing their jobs, are we still going to have enough babies anyway to replace these new people? And I honestly, I don't know what the answer is. But I do think that if this is like something that most people care about, and if this is a future that we want to prepare for, our focus on trying to prepare for this new upcoming reality should be quality over quantity. And that means preparing kids effectively to be in these jobs. In order to prepare kids effectively to be in these jobs, it means that people have to make smart, conservative choices with who they marry and with who they have kids, so that they have enough resources, so that these kids do well in school, so that you can have somebody who can code and who can compete in this new reality that we are going to very swiftly be a part of. I think that, well, anyway, I'll just stop there for now.
Well, I mean, you pretty much hit most of the notes that have been on my mind this whole time. And then, yes, Mike, talking to Fairy Queen. It's been great so far. Uh, Forcing people to have children when these children are going to be at a disadvantage. And I think the whole $5,000 thing is good, but that's not nearly enough. You want to make sure that the kids that are being brought into this world are covered, will have good education, good health care, so on and so forth. So I would think before dealing with birthrights and abortion, all these other things, you should shore up giving people incentives to have children in the first place. Just tossing them $5,000 really isn't going to get them very far. So, like what you said, better educated children in the future to be able to compete in the marketplace is the better answer. And I never hear the people that are complaining not enough kids talk about this.
Yeah, and I think that there might be a couple of reasons why, the Andrew Yang point is never brought up in the birth rate conversation. And it's something that I've noticed with Andrew Wilson. I don't think I've heard Jim Bob, he's another conservative streamer, talk about this. But the sense that I get when I hear these people complain about the birth rate is what the understated thing is. It feels like it feels like a class war is happening without actually saying that out loud.
It is.
It feels as though, yeah, it's a class war, right? And it's impacting, I think, men and women in working class environments and in working class households more so than we're seeing in upper class households or middle class households, which is that women are more likely to go to college. Women are vastly more likely to have an income. They're vastly more likely to be able to support themselves. They are in a financial position to be able to ask more of their husbands and more of their boyfriends in order to settle down and have kids with them. There was an article in The Atlantic that came out recently, and it had a very interesting statistic. It said that for the first time in decades, that women are dating down. What that means basically is that we're reaching a point where women who have at least a bachelor's degree, women who have gone on to university, they are more likely to date somebody who has less education than they do than in the past. Now, the mitigating number for this is that they aren't less likely to select a partner who makes less money than them. They still are trying to find husbands and people to settle down with who can make at least the same level of income as they do. But they're still, even though this is clearly the impulse behind a lot of these marriages, we still see that there's still a slight, nosedive in that direction too. It's not significant. It's not a huge necessarily. Like, they're still selecting for men that can financially support them and their families. But they are more likely to make a little bit more than their husbands do than they would have like 10 or 20 years ago. So we are seeing, and I would think that this is impacting people that come from money. So if you come from a rich family, if you come from a rich family, a rich environment, this is not a conversation that really bothers you too much, right?
Right.
But if you're from a working class family, right? If you're from a working class environment, these gender tensions are tense. I would, like a lot of working class women probably, and a lot of working class men probably feel vastly threatened by, their peers being more likely to go off to college, by their peers being more likely to complete university. And to be fair, and I think this goes back to the AI conversation we have seen a huge increase in the number of men and the number of enrollments in trade school. That's something that's greatly and vastly increased, like over the past 10 years. There are way more people going into trade school. And this is something that Andrew Yang even mentioned, right? Like, yeah, we're going to have automated factories. We're going to have self-driving cars. A lot of people are going to lose their jobs, but you're still going to need plumbers. You're still going to need mechanics. You're still going to need people in the trades who know how things work so that they can fix them, right? If you like the McDonald's example before, it's all fine and dandy to have a completely automated McDonald's, but what happens when the oil machine runs dry, right? What happens when you need somebody to fix the conveyor belt? You actually do need a human being to do that job. So that seems to be like at least for that particular class of people, like how most people seem to be making it up. But here's something, Leafy, that I've noticed, and I don't think the trade, like, okay, this is something I've heard from a lot of guys that complain about women going off to university. What they will say is they will say that the university education is too feminized. They will say that university education is not something that they want to do, that they don't feel that these degrees are real degrees that actually add up to a real career. They are less worthy of respect. I think what they're really communicating is that they're lower in status if you go off and you pursue them, and so they don't want to pursue these jobs as much, right? And you would think, okay, but are these guys all going to trade school? Are these guys all becoming electricians and plumbers? And for some of them, yes, but for a lot of them, that's not what they're doing. Have you heard of NEET before? NEET?
Oh yeah, not in education, employment, or training.
Yep. There is a broadening demographic of young men for whom that falls into. So these men, they're not going to trade school. They're not going to university. They are not getting, a small time job. That's not what they're doing. It's literally a fancy way to say basement boy. We have a broadening group of people for who are neat. We have a broadening group of people who the reason why they aren't going off to university and the reason why they're not going off to trade school, it's not because they feel that it's because they want something handed to them, right? They just don't want to work. I mean, that's really like what's happening. And maybe like that's a consequence of like having life be so easy, of having the luxuries that we do. My understanding is that a lot of these people like wind up like doing low skills work, or they wind up doing some sort of gig economy labor, but they don't usually, at least as far as I know anyway. That's my general perception. What do you think?
Well, so the NEET movement pretty much started in Japan, or at least I think that's where it originated. And it was a bunch of younger people seeing that even if they got into the workforce, they just end up in really poor working conditions, never be allowed to move up because the older generation's never going to let go of the reins of the society. And they'd never be able to provide for themselves or a family the way they think they would need to for the amount of work they're being expected to put in. So they just say, screw it, and just don't do anything and live in their rooms. Which I think is
Yeah.
kind of similar for what happens with, a lot of people in Western society now. They're seeing that, hey, if I go to work, I'm basically going to be poor anyway, but I'm putting out X amount of hours out of my week just to be poor and not be able to pay rent or even get an apartment or get a car or anything. So why don't I just not do that and see what happens in the future?
To be fair, I think we're seeing a lot of women do this as well. But it's expressing itself differently. Like one thing I've noticed, like this is more of a cultural Twitter trend. It may not mean much, but there you see like there's a lot of young women who are young conservative women who will say something to the effect of, oh, I was born, to pick daisies, to cuddle babies and to cook pancakes for breakfast. But I'm damned, to file emails, send PDFs, and code Excel spreadsheets. It's the idea that like women aren't supposed to work. We're supposed to be delicate. We're supposed to be at home. We're supposed to, rest. All of this stuff, right? That's something I've heard. There's a specific demographic of women for whom this is what they're saying. It's I'm too hot to work. It's basically the short way of putting it, right? I'm too attractive, to dirty my hands, with this typewriter at work. That's not what I'm here to do. And it expresses itself differently, right? Because there's still the expectation here is that, you'll marry a man and that he will provide for you and that he is the reason why you don't have to go to work and why you don't have to have a career. Whereas, like actually, I don't know if like NEET only includes men, but my understanding is that it was specifically to men, like from what I've read.
It's for the most part.
Is that true? Am I wrong?
That's
For the
usually the
most part,
cohort you
yeah.
see when they're represented.
Yeah. In both cases, like both of these populations, like the essential thing is I don't want to work and I don't feel like I should work and I don't feel like it's worth it for me to work. So I'm going to try to find another person to be a source of income for me, whether that's the state or whether that's your parents or whether for women, as is often the option, to get married, and to rely upon a man providing you with this income to live. It's kind of, and I think you mentioned it's because like most people, it sounds like you think that the reason for this is that people aren't earning enough money for them to have the type of life that they thought that their parents were able to live. and so they're simply choosing to opt out of working as hard or applying themselves.
Somewhat. I mean, I can't think of many people that aspire to work over 40 hours a week to have to live in an apartment with like four other people and still barely be making rent.
Right, but I think that like the answer to that would be, like it seems like there's kind of a cultural malaise, right? Like, I mean, sure, right? But there are things you can do. This isn't the first time, that the economy has sucked,
Yeah.
People have been in worse times, And in both of these cases, regardless of which population we're talking about, the truth is like if times are hard enough, you can find ways to pull yourself out of it, right? I think that for some of these people, like the demographic of women that I'm talking about, I think that this is true for a lot of men. I don't think it's simply that I don't want to have to work 40 hours a week so that I can live in one room with like six other roommates. I think it's that there is an expectation that I shouldn't have to work as hard. I shouldn't have to apply myself. I am above doing this type of labor. It is not for me to do, right? And different excuses are given, depending on what demographic we're talking about. Like for these women, for instance, it's that I am too dainty and delicate. For these men, it's that, this is not befitting of an aristocrat of the 21st century. What do you mean I have to work at a Panda Express? I want to have noble work. I want work that accrues me status of some type. What do you mean I have to do this type of job? Like we have, and like I think we do know that. I mean, maybe it was COVID. Maybe COVID screwed us all up with our expectations for what work should mean and how we should apply ourselves. Because like it is true. Like a lot of people were used to staying home. They were used, to it was a type of working environment that like we're not really that we hadn't really had en masse or brought upon us so quickly before. So maybe this is the aftermath of COVID that we're experiencing.
I mean, it could be the case. I just noticed that there's a severe rise of working homeless people, like people literally working at least 3 to 5 hours a day that are living in their car or out on the street. And that's something I don't wish on anyone, and I don't think was normal in any of the previous generations.
Um, well, kind of, but I think that I could be wrong. But I think I watched the debate that you mentioned with Soy Pill and with Andrew Wilson, and I think Soy Pill is right. I think it is true that people generally have more disposable income today. I think it is true that the average person does have more disposable income and money that they can use at their will today than they would have in like the 1950s. But the difference is, I think that people have use more luxuries and use more stuff today than a person in the 1950s. So if you're in the 50s, right, you have your car, you have your television set, you have your newspaper that's brought to your door. If you live in the 21st century, think of all the mindless things that you can spend your money on. You
Oh,
have your computer, you have an internet service, you have streaming services, right? I mean, I don't have to tell you about all of the whistle and bells that you can get, on your piece of metal, that you can type on and make and words magically appear, right? You have your cell phone. That's not even something. I don't even think you can get away with not having a cell phone today.
no.
I think we're at the point where you basically have to have one. I think it's even difficult just to have a dumb phone. Like I think I've heard of people saying that they have a dumb phone and that they avoid using their like smartphones, but I think we're going to get to the point where even that is going to probably go the way of the dodo. I think probably the difference would be is that there's just more expected of you, like what you're supposed to have in order to keep up with the times today than maybe would have been the case in the 50s. You could probably still live a 50s lifestyle if you wanted to. It's just that a lot of opportunities and a lot of ability to connect with people to access this world would be shut off to you if you chose to live that way, I suppose.
Yeah, you definitely lose out on a lot of opportunities. And I think it was toward the early 2000s, you pretty much had to start applying for jobs online. So if you don't have access to internet and a way for them to reach you via the internet, you more than likely aren't getting hired. Like the days of walking around the streets with your resume in hand and, getting a job one day, losing it the next day, and getting another job the next day is not even a thing anymore.
Yeah. That and your computer and your phone, it's different than your car, right? It's different than, other large expenses that we typically make. There are cars from the 50s that still run. You can find people, mechanics, who can get them working, who can find pieces, or who can order pieces or have them made in order to like get the car like still usable and running. People used to be more familiar with how to work their cars and how to fix them personally, how to change tires, right? But think about like your cell phone or like your computer. You get an update on the new computer, every 5 to 10 years, you're going to have to replace it with the new model, and you literally can't find the piece. You can't find the chip. You can't find, the software that you would need in order to make that same computer run. Like if I found my parents' computer from, I don't know, like 1995, and I tried running, that Windows Mac that, I tried running up that computer up today.
Ooh.
I don't even, I don't even think I could get it to work. I don't think I could do it. I don't think it would be a usable computer for me to have. And like think on all of these other pieces of tech that we could think of, like a landline phone, you could get that to work. You could find an old car that you could fix up and you could still drive. It wouldn't be easy, but it would be possible. But your computer, though, is an entirely different, probably one of the most necessary pieces of tech that you have in your home. That's something that you're forced to replace, right? Companies, they design their computers specifically to slow down the soft. I think that something that happened with iPhone like a few years ago.
Oh yeah,
They
absolutely.
specifically were making older phones, slow down, basically to be impossible to use. So you had to replace your old phone with a new phone. Like these phones, like these pieces of tech that we have, they're not built to last. They're made to be replaceable,
I
which
think
is
what you've been
another
talking about is
difference.
planned obsolescence, and that's definitely a
Yeah.
big hole in people's wallets lately.
Yeah. Yeah. And so maybe I think that might be a difference in like why things are more expensive, and why it's more expensive to live. It's just that it's more expensive. Like the things that are expected for you to have in order to continue existing, those things are more expensive and continue to be more expensive as you go on. So, and maybe
Oh,
that might be a theory. I don't know. I'd be curious to hear what other people think.
you kind of touched on like the other things that I wanted to get into you with dating show stuff. Like
Yeah.
you're like dancing around it, and I'm like super interested, but I'm liking the way this is going so far, and trying to figure out
Okay.
like, because like with a car, you got smog and registration, other things, and an older car may
Hmm.
not be able to meet that, but you never know. But at the end of the day, the newer cars are made to break down at a faster rate than those old cars, and aren't intended to be worked on by people. You're supposed to take them in, and that's
Hmm.
like a whole industry they've created around this to keep people like in a position to have to continue working. But when it comes
One of
down
the
to it,
things,
I don't think like even with fast food and things, they've raised like I think managers at Panda Express are making like close to $40 an hour now,
mhm.
and that's still not enough.
Yeah. Yeah. One thing too, like we mentioned before, like this being kind of a class war, and we talked about, about going to university, raising kids, to be more effective at being able to go to university in order to be able to succeed, in order to try to make sure that the people that we do have are able to adjust to this new plummeting reality that we're all shipping towards. But like as you mentioned with like planned obsolescence with cars, I have to be honest with you, if my car broke down, I wouldn't know what to do with it. I wouldn't know, what hammer or wrench to use. I wouldn't know like how to personally change my oil. If I had to change a tire, I mean, could I find a YouTube video to help me do it myself? I suppose I could. But really what I'm going to do is I'm going to call somebody to try to change my tire for me, right? I'm going to call my insurance guy to come and do it. And there's so much about, my house, about this computer, about so many of the pieces of tech that I use in my life that I really don't have any idea how it works. All I know is that I click the button on and the screen flashes and then I type in my name and then I'm in my computer system. That's all I know, right? And is it possible for me to learn actually? Well, sure it is, right? But effectively, like the way I live my life, it feels like magic. It basically is magic to me. And there are some people smart enough to know and to give me the explanation, right? But as we go on and as we push forward, the world is becoming increasingly more complex and therefore more frightening and more alienating for the average person to interact with, right? Like I and so and you also have to think about something else too. When you think about like the past two like generations of kids, right? When you think about Gen Z, when you think about millennials, we're talking about like two crops of people who had extreme pressure to go off to college, right? We have so many examples of baby Ivies, of parents where helicopter parents were putting tons of pressure on them to do tons of extracurriculars, to be in honors, to do AP, when they're in excuse me, when they're in ninth grade, we have this huge amount of pressure on all of these kids to be successful, to go off to university, right? um I think that it would be difficult to imagine, a population of children who have for whom university education has been more pushed upon them, right? This isn't the 50s, this isn't the 60s, right? So if we're thinking about the future, about like what the future group of kids is, what we're going to need in the future, right? I mean, what more could we honestly do to an extent to try to prepare and to try to get kids to go off to university? Because a lot of these parents, they really are obsessive about, making sure that he's eating the right food, making sure that he's getting into sports young, making sure that that you're reading, and there are all sorts of play that we can do. I mean, that's part of the popularity, I think, of a lot of mommy bloggers, or a lot of, there are lots of like YouTube channels that are specifically devoted to families showing you how to take care of your kids. And there is kind of a homeschool movement, like where it's devoted towards, showing a softer, gentler way of life, right? But really, like the impetus behind that is, how can I best prepare my kid? How can I max my kid out to the absolute possible extreme to try to get them to be successful? That's something that's very much at the forefront of a lot of parents' minds. And I think what we're finding out is that a lot of kids are not cut out for college. They're not gonna go. They don't want to go. They don't, right? A lot of people are not cut out to code, okay? We want them to be cut out to code, we want them to go. I mean, that's the world, that's what we're going to need as the future pushes forward. But realistically, right? I mean, when we think about, not that's going to be for people who are probably smarter, right? That's going to be people who probably like excelled in school, who did really well, people that are at the higher end of the distribution. When we're thinking about like the average person, though, right? The average person who just wants to get through school and to get finished, I don't see that guy being happy sitting behind a computer desk, writing lines of code for his job. I mean, I can picture the people that I went to high school with, right? I don't see those people that as being the job that they want to have, like when they get older. Um, I think probably like the way forward is probably to encourage a lot of these people to choose to go to trade school. And that means bringing things back to schools like wood shop, bringing driver's ed back to high schools. I'm not sure why that ever left. That's probably something that should be included as a class to take. ROTC, encouraging military service, preparing kids to be able to join the military so that if they do want to go to the college, that's an option for them to exercise. Encouraging trades, having job fairs at like local high schools, explaining to kids what their options are. I was in a classroom recently, and they had the coolest. It was a wood shop class, but it wasn't just a wood shop class. You could pretend that you were driving a rocket. There was a rocket building station. You had power drills, you had tools. It was a huge, giant classroom where you could pretend to design a building. It was sort of like a 3D thing that you could show up on your computer screen. Like, we have to be realistic that a lot of people, as much as we want, to prepare the next generation of coders, we have to be realistic that a lot of people are just not going to be cut out to do that. And they're not going to want to do that either, right? I mean, think about because like when we're thinking about like jobs that accrue status, although I say that, but like coders, I mean, what do you think? Like, what do you think? I'm kind of been babbling for a little bit,
Like
but what are
there's
your
certain
thoughts?
jobs that sound good, and this is like also where the whole dating show thing comes in. And I guess we'll just get to that because we've been on a good tear for a minute. Uh, so you watched some of that balloon pop show I mentioned, right?
I actually haven't. What show? What happened in the show?
Okay, so it's just the show in general. So they'll bring somebody out and they'll have like 8 people lined up, each holding a balloon. And the person
Okay.
will come out and start, saying who they are, what they do, yada, yada, yada. And people pop their balloon when they feel they aren't interested. And then,
Oh wait, I have seen this. I have
okay,
seen this occasionally.
yeah, there's a few different, well, there's a lot of episodes. It's on Netflix now. But there's been a lot of moments that show like how rejection affects people, and it's really interesting. But
hmm
most of the people that come up and they're like, well, what do you do? And they start throwing out a bunch of buzzwords like all these people have 3 or more jobs. I'm, a communicate employee relations for this such and such. I'm also an influencer. I'm also, and they start trying to throw out things to make themselves sound like they actually work when really they aren't working. Like they're basically unemployed or near
Yeah,
unemployed.
yeah.
And based on these things, some people will pop their balloon, and then also people lie about what it is they do.
hmm
And so the level of acceptance when it comes down to these things, and then also like, do you have kids? That's another thing that tends to get balloons popped. uh, what they feel they bring to the table, or what they feel the gender role should be, also tends to get balloons popped. And I feel like this is giving people very unrealistic ideas of dating, or is it the most realistic? I'm not sure.
Um. So the question is it unrealistic? Like, does it give people an unrealistic idea, but like what dating is like?
Or what to expect when you're looking for somebody in the dating field.
I think it's probably a yes and a no. And the yes part is that the reality is a lot of people use Tinder. A lot of people use dating apps. A lot of people, I mean, it's just true, right? It's not a weird thing anymore. It's a pretty normalized thing for people to do when they want to find somebody to date, that they download Tinder. Yes, it's still the case that people still find meet meet people within their friend groups or like whatever, like wherever they frequent. Like it's, I don't think that's still so uncommon, but it's so normalized like to go on Tinder or to go on to OkCupid and to try to flip through people. And when you can't see the person, right? When you can't talk to the person, right? When the only information you have, right, is what they look like, what their job is like, all of these little facts about them, it and you have like a million people to sift through, it really does become that brutal, right? Because you have so many other people that you can look at, right? You're just swiping, 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 right? And so by the time you're finished, right, you're going to have a quick pile of people that you can still sort through who have everything that you want, at least on paper. And then you can see afterwards if you have a genuine connection with those people. So, in that sense, because it's so normalized, sadly, or not sadly, depending on how you view it, I do think it's kind of realistic. I do think that is probably a lot of people's experiences with how they meet people. It's not uncommon these days for people to meet their spouses off of Tinder. It's not unheard of. So I think that's so yes, kind of, um, but also no, right? And there's still the X factor that you have to consider, and that's something that I never really hear people talk about on Twitch. In fact, I rarely hear people talk about it because it's kind of ephemeral to discuss, right?
Hmm.
Which is that like when you meet somebody who doesn't make sense at all on paper, right? And this happens to people, right? This is the person who has no job, you know, and maybe they don't have the best degree, or maybe they have kind of a funny snaggle tooth, right? There are lots of things that are definitely not on your list, but you just love them. You like them. Your attraction to them is weirdly instant and instantaneous. And they are someone who you feel an intense pull and draw towards, who you want to see and who you want to talk to. And this happens to a lot of people. Like, if for those of you who like Sex in the City, and I do, okay, I love Sex in the City, one of my favorite shows. So if you watch that show, right, I'm basically describing what happens to Charlotte, right? Charlotte, she's married, to the great guy who's handsome on paper. He has the penthouse in New York. He's handsome. He looks like Prince Charming. He comes from a good family. He's rich. And their sex life is terrible, okay? It's not good at all. The mother-in-law is constantly meddling and interfering. There's a weird scene where the mother-in-law is giving the husband a bath. Like there's all sorts of Freud shit going on like in this relationship, okay? It's very weird and very strange. And the mother-in-law is one of the contributing reasons why she and Prince Charming get divorced, right? And when she remarries, she doesn't remarry another Prince Charming. She remarries Harry, a bald lawyer who has like a zebra throw. You know, his whole room basically looks like a video gamer's idea of a rich penthouse, like from the 90s. You got the zebra prints, the cheetah carpets, you know, you've got this huge giant purple clamshell bed, you know, everything is sort of weird and late wavy. You've got lava lamps. Weirdly, when he takes his shirt off, the reason why it's funny to call him Harry is that he's covered with hair below the neck everywhere and she couldn't see it. And he's funny, right? And he's like, he gets mustard on his face, you know, he's not anything like Prince Charming at all. And she loves him. And and there was just that X factor. Something just clicked when she liked him. I mean, I think a lot of people have had the experience where you have the person that shouldn't make sense, but you like them and you like them enough that they have enough of the X factor that you're willing to look over a lot of these other things that you thought you cared about before. And that does happen, I think.
So that's kind of where I was getting at it with, like, that's the more realistic idea, is to be looking for that X factor, that thing that works for you. But I think so many people have been listening to all these online personalities or whatever because the marketing of all these people is to play to your insecurities. And if they play to your insecurities and you're like, oh, this person has the answer I've been looking for as to why I can't find what I'm looking for. And that's when all these goofy ass questions come up. When in reality, if you're vibing with the person and you link with that person, all those questions don't really matter and they can be worked toward. But I don't see that happening on these shows at all. Like, they just ask the topical questions and then balloons get popped and then they ask them why they popped the balloon, and usually it's some asinine thing as to why. Or attitude. I mean, that also happens.
Yeah. I think a lot of it really boils down to having good social skills. It's being about being able to talk to people. It's about being able to be funny, being able to joke with people, being able to be charming, you know, witty, you know, knowing how to flirt, how to wink at people. A lot of this, there are lots of people who, it sounds terrible to say this, but it's just true, okay? There are people who are fat, who are ugly, who are broke, who have horrible personalities, but because they are charming and witty and funny and they have great social skills, they pull. They have people that like them and that want to have sex with them and who want to be in relationships with them. This is a thing that happens. We can all think of people. I mean, I can even think of people like this. Like, we can all think of examples of people who are like this, you know? And this is kind of in a part like why the gym maxing thing doesn't work. You can't, I mean, a lot of these things are generally good things to live by just as a general principle, right? You probably should have a job. If you're past the age of 30, at this point, it needs to be an adult job where you make an average income that you can live on. You know, it's true that you should take a shower every day and that you should have some kind of exercise routine and that you should try not to be fat, you know. I mean, it's not like there's nothing to any of this other advice, right? But there are people who are obese, who smell of cheese, and who have marijuana flags for wallpaper, and they are loved, okay? Someone more evil and fatter than you right now is cuddling their beloved to sleep because they're charming, because they're witty, because they are able to talk to people. And I think you're right about like the algorithm stuff about people preying on their insecurities. And I really think like the undertone of that is that a lot of this dating advice, it's coming from people that have an axe to grind who want to make money off of your insecurity, right? I mean, and I don't think like that's exactly obvious. No, it is obvious. It's obvious for men, right? Because like we have, you know, people like Andrew Tate, for instance, you know, buy my course, right? The pimping course, you know, go to Cobra Tate, right? And then you can learn to be a great pimp like me. So you have some of it is like really obvious and in your face. For women, I think it's more subtle. This is like how I hear a lot of female influencers try to suck in people. It sounds like this, right? You know, I used to be really insecure. I used to be really anxiously attached. I used to want him to call me, to text me, to love me, to care for me. I used to be all over the place. But then I went and I found my inner divine feminine energy. And I began focusing on myself. And I would like you to come with me on this journey and all this other baloney, right? And basically, what they try to tell you is that you need to listen to them, right? You need to listen to them about how you can fix yourself so that you're not slobbering over every boy that you fall in love with and that comes your way. And the thing is, if anybody tells you that you can just self improve yourself in order to be less lonely, this is kind of true. But the people that are usually saying that are usually just after your money, right?
Yeah.
You can improve. You have to improve yourself. You have to make yourself better. And also buy my course for just $10.99, and I'll tell you how to do that, right? I think a lot of the self improvement thing, like you have to be careful of that because I do think a lot of it is snake oil.
Yeah, I thoroughly agree. I don't think any of these people have the answers that people are looking for. And there was a question from the chat. Did you like Sex in the City or Girls better?
Oh, Sex in the City for sure. Girls is too depressing and too narcissistic. If you watch it, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about, right?
I've
And
not
like the
watched
selling
either.
point of, oh, you should watch. Okay, I prefer Sex in the City. Girls is witty, like there is a wit to it. It is a smart show. Um, but I just kind of find it to be okay. So you know the premise, right, of Sex in the City and Girls.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, Sex in the City, what I really like about it is that it is optimistic. You know, it's an optimistic show about dating and relationships, about it's funny, you know, it's uplifting, it's optimistic, you know. It shows you, you know, what we all hope female friendships could be, of what we all hope, you know, what a love affair in New York could be like. You know, it gives a way for you to laugh about experiences like bad sex experiences or bad dating experiences that you've had. Like there are so many examples like throughout the show of like where they talk about like these things that happen to people, but they turn it into a funny story and it's something that cheers you and that makes you feel better about who you are. When you watch Girls, like I think one of the first few episodes is where Lena Dunham's character gets HPV. You know, it's one of the first few, and then like there's another one where she's mooching money off of her family so that she can write this narcissistic memoir. There's the Adam Driver character that she's dating who says the weird Cabbage Patch Kid shit during sex with
What?
her. Like I know, like it's a lot of really gross, weird, bizarre stuff, right? And I know why Girls is doing it. I know why Lena Dunham chose to write Girls in this way. It's supposed to be the anti-Sex in the City. It's supposed to be Sex in the City was a lie. You know, it was glamorous, it was glitzy, right? But who could possibly afford all of those Manolo Blahniks anyway, right? How could she possibly do it? You know, it's unrealistic. So instead, I'm going to offer you something absolutely depressing and narcissistic and gray and banal as the mirror to like what that was supposed to be. And I don't think that that's the way either, because I don't accept that the realistic version of female friendships and of dating relationships in your early 20s is this complete gray, bleak drag that Lena Dunham and like her crew presented it to be. And also like there's what's his face? Did you ever who wrote Infinite Jest? What was his name? David Foster Wallace. Did you ever read any David Foster Wallace?
I absolutely have not. I've never heard that
You
name.
have not? No. Okay. Well, okay. So David Foster Wallace, what he talked about was he basically criticized a lot of Gen X media. And one of the things that he criticized about Gen X media was a lot of it was too ironic and too pessimistic. Seinfeld is an example of this, right? Seinfeld has, you know, no character development. It's the point of the show, right? The people are all terrible, you know. Sorry, even if you love Kramer, okay, Kramer's not a good person, okay. He almost killed people by adopting that piece of the highway, okay. This is not that kind of show, right? They're all terrible people. They're all incredibly selfish. They never improve. They never get better. And it's just nihilism, right? That's all the show is. And that was so much of a lot of the media, like from during like that particular time period. And I think, and the reason for that is that it was supposed to be pessimistic, ironic response to the media of the boomers, right? It was the anti Leave It to Beaver, right? The anti, what is it? Oh, I can't. I'm trying to remember another like 50s or 60s sitcom show. Um, it was supposed to be like a mirror comedy of that. Like, oh, you think this is what a perfect family should be, but actually Bart Simpson, is supposed to be the anti of that, right? You have George Bush, we have the Simpsons. That's sort of like that was the rallying cry, of like the 80s and the 90s. And a lot of people who are Gen Xers today, you have people like Bill Maher, you have people like Jon Stewart, right? And it's even in the way that when they speak, right? It's constant irony, it's constant sneering kind of at like what's happening, at like these people who think they know everything, but really I know more. Sarcasm is something that's typically used. And it's just depressing after a while to watch, right? Like there is something so punchable at Bill Maher's face. Like whenever you see, like even if you agree with him, right? It's like you look like a smug Persian cat sitting there, right? Like it's just completely soulless. Like to hear a lot of these people speak, and I think that's why a lot of people that are like in their 30s and I guess now 40s, and 20s, you're kind of seeing a new sincerity movement. It's kind of like The Office, the difference between the British Office and the American Office. We started to see sort of this shift in about like the 2010s. So if you remember, like the British Office was completely ironic, completely pessimistic.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, the main character got, with the receptionist at the end, but it was kind of a dull, bleak, everything woe is me kind of a show, right? And you were just the joy of the show was just laughing at how awful, Ricky Gervais's character was supposed to be. But the American Office is not like that, right? The American Office starts like that in like the first couple of seasons, but it quickly becomes more optimistic, as the show goes on, right? Yeah, it's true. Michael is an ass. Yeah, it's true. He is every, bigoted ism in the book. He, has the weird kissing scene with Oscar. He causes Stanley to have a heart attack on the floor. He sexually harasses Ryan all throughout like the seasons. Like he's terrible. We all know that he's bad, right? But then you also feel extremely bad for him because Jan is abusing him, right? And you do feel badly for him screaming at him, right? You feel badly about the fact that he's lonely, right? He talks about wanting to have kids. He talks about buying a condo because he wants to fill it with children. And it's incredibly painful to see that he wants people to like him so much. So they take these awful characters, right? These characters who are kind of grumps, and they make them likable. They made them human. Like that was even true in Parks and Rec with like with the was it Ron Stewart? Was that his name? Like the breakfast libertarian guy? Like they did this, they had like this sort of like stream of
Ron
media.
Swanson?
Yeah, Oh yeah, not Ron Stewart. I'm sorry. I'm thinking of like the, you know what I'm thinking? I'm thinking of the guy that sang Maggie May. That's what I'm thinking of. Not Ron Swanson. But yeah, no, there was kind of a new sincerity, right? We're going to be funny. We're still going to acknowledge the irony, but we're also going to be sincere, right? We're going to have, it's kind of a progression from like the old type of nihilism, which is that everything means nothing, and therefore everything means everything, right? So it's the acknowledgement that nothing matters, right? Nothing in your life really matters. There is no inherent meaning to anything. But what that means is that you have to imbue your life with meaning that you construct for yourself. And that makes life more meaningful because even though there might not be an inherent meaning to you getting up every day and walking outside and breathing in the fresh, clean air, smelling the birds as they float on by, it has meaning to you, right? It's your meaning, right? It doesn't mean anything, and because it's the only thing that you have, it means everything to you. There's a term for it in media. I think it's called meta-modernism. It's the progression, from nihilism to acknowledging nihilism and yet still finding something sincere to care about.
I think that's why I identified with Always Sunny a bit more, because I never liked Seinfeld because they're trying to pass off these terrible people as having some reasonability and some likability to them. And I was never
Yeah.
buying it. And so with Always Sunny, they're terrible people. And you expect all
Yeah.
the bad things in life to happen to them once the story's over and done with. And you don't feel bad about expecting that at any point.
Yeah.
It's a lot more
Yeah.
realistic. But it's
Exactly.
still nihilistic, but at least it has
Mm-hmm.
some air of reality to it.
Yeah. And there is also too, like in Seinfeld, and not even just Seinfeld, but Larry David, like Curb Your Enthusiasm is kind of like this, where, and I think Stephen Fry even made this comment about like American comedy versus British comedy, which is that the American comic thinks that he is sort of better, like he's the sly guy, ironically giving you his observations about life, right? He's kind of like a stand-in for God, explaining how planet Earth functions and how ridiculous it is, right? He's the Jesus in blue jeans on the stage, rolling his eyes and gaffing, in front of a huge audience. But that's not what the British comic is like. The British comic is depressed. He's like, everything's shit, man. Like that's what the British comic is like, right? He's accepted his fate. He's like, oh my god, everything's depressing. Oh dear, like, and that's kind of like what the British comic is like. But I don't know, like, but then I say that I like the new sincerity. I like that. Here's another example. Did you see everything? What is it called? Everything, Everywhere. It's
Once movie.
that's the one. Yeah, that's the one. That's
Yeah.
exactly it. That's a really good example of a metamodernist movie, right? You have so many things going on, right? It's incredibly like it's nihilistic, right? It's absolutely is nihilistic, right? You have the everything bagel, like the scene like where the girl says that everything means nothing. You have all of these different timelines. Like a lot of ironic media, you have a lot of you have the rocks, talking to each other, moving towards each other. You have all sorts of absurdist things that you can see throughout the film, right? But then you still have, the mom, you still have the family. They're still connecting to each other, right? Despite through the absurdity, despite through the nihilism, right? The mom is still able to save her daughter at the end, despite all of these different aspects compounding upon each other. So, but I say that, and I say that the new sincerity thing is good, right? And I do think it's good. I do think it's probably an improvement from simply being constantly ironic all of the time. But I also think that there's something about it that doesn't feel really like sincere to me, Like one of the things about David Foster Wallace is that he would talk about being really sincere. He would talk about this need to try to find meaning and to not simply laugh, at like the meaninglessness of life, but you had to find something to ground yourself in. He was an atheist, he was somebody who like would talk about, how annoying atheists were, for instance, right? And how, you should really learn more from religious people. He was like a Jordan Peterson fan, like who died, like years before like Peterson ever became famous. It's that whole thing. It's the idea of religion is more of a cultural marker than is like an absolute like statement of truth. Was sort of like Foster's perspective. Yeah, but the thing is that David Foster Wallace would say this, right? But in point of fact, the way that he lived his life was not very authentic, right? He would pass himself off as being kind of this everyman, who's just like everyone else. He would wear blue jeans. He would wear bandanas, he would like, he deliberately tried to like make himself look like the quote unquote everyman with a hippie with long hair. But then you would read his work. You would read things like Infinite Jest. You would read, 12 Interviews with Horrible Men. I think that's the name of the book. You would read these books, and they're just chock full of like huge, giant words, unnecessarily dense sentence constructions. You would read so much of it, and a lot of it was so ostentatious and so overflowing with complexity when you tried to actually access out any of his work. Like that felt inauthentic, right? It's very clear from the work that he writes that he does not conceive of himself as the everyman at all. He does not conceive of himself in this way. And yet this is how he's sort of pretending to present himself. It's kind of like the guy who's it's like House, like how House, he thinks that he's better than everyone else, how intelligent he is, but he walks around in jeans, right? He's not walking around in scrubs. He acts as though he's the everyman. It's a weird kind of form of arrogance that's very particular. It's not like what we typically would conceive of when we're thinking of an arrogant person. This is the person who thinks that, he's too good to wear the suit, to your sister's wedding. He's too good, to to sit with people who are distinguished, right? It's kind of a, I don't know if that makes sense or not, but I've
It
always
does.
found,
The pretentious person is trying to seem reachable or down to earth when they are definitely
yeah,
neither.
yes, and they don't really think of themselves as being down to earth. They think of themselves as lowering themselves down to the masses, right? It's the angel clipping his wings so he can walk amongst mortals. Like that's how these people think of themselves. They don't think of themselves as actually being like amongst, normal, average, everyday people. So I don't know. But yeah, no, I don't know how much I believe the new sincerity movement, and I don't know how much you can actually contrive a meaning where you don't actually also think that there is one. I think that there is something to this idea that meaning is something is more meaningful to you, an idea is more meaningful to you if you think that it is inherent to the object or to the pursuit. Um, like if I tell you, like okay, you feel like your life has no purpose, right? Well, think of a fun activity you can do. And then, well, why is this meaningful to you? I don't know. You make up a reason why you like it and you just focus on that. Well, sure, you could do that, but that would be kind of an empty pursuit, right? It would be kind of an empty thing for you to do. You can't just make yourself feel like you have purpose about a thing.
Yeah. No, we got into a conversation not too long ago about purpose, and I found the whole thing to be kind of ridiculous because things only have the purpose that we give them. So, like, having people tell you what your purpose is, having a book tell you what your purpose is, or an ideology just seems silly. If you find purpose in the thing that you're doing, you're winning. But also, we're going to go ahead and go to open. And so,
Okay.
please continue. It will continue as it is. But we are now in open. So, if
Yeah.
anybody wants to hop in, go ahead and hop into the any channel and I'll drag you in. But yeah, like that's a religion, especially telling you what your purpose is supposed to be, is just, I'd rather not have my purpose defined by someone or something else.
Yeah. But I mean, do you feel like what your purpose or like what meaning you have, do you feel like that's something that you're inherently drawn to? Like when I think of things that move me, when I think of an art piece that moves me, when I think of a book that I really like, I don't have a choice but to like it. I don't have a choice but to be moved by this piece of art in front of me. I can suppress the tears, but I can't make myself not want to cry, if I watch something that genuinely makes me upset, you know? Um, and that's kind of like what I'm saying, like when you think about, like even the words that I'm saying to you right now, like where did these thoughts come from, and there's a lot, like I remember when I used to watch Sam Harris, like he talked about like consciousness, he talked about free will, like where do our thoughts come from, like what we're drawn to. I don't know that we can exercise free will over the things that motivate us. I think that the things that motivate us are probably going to be different for each person, but I don't think it's something that you can create. I think it is something you have to find organically out in the world.
I think we are drawn, like, we have predispositions. Like, each personality has something that's going to speak to them. And there are going to be things that you wouldn't think you're going to be drawn to, and then you are. Like, people can go around saying,
Mhm.
"Oh, I don't like musicals," and then they watch South Park the movie, and all of a sudden, now you like a musical. And
Yeah.
I'm sure the song spoke to you and all these different things. And this is a brand new coil testing. I just put it in yesterday. Uh, Same thing goes with books, music, movies, like all these things. We're going to have a predisposition that we may not even know we have. Some people never even tried to write and then find that they are brilliant writers and they never thought about themselves in that way. So I think we have to allow ourselves to be open to finding a purpose that works for us and finding something that fulfills those things inside of us that we may not even know is the idea, because we're being told our purpose is to have kids, get married, have kids, or work this kind of job, make this amount of money, and this is what your purpose is. And I just don't think that works for most people. And we got
Hmm.
Tiberius D in the side chat. Cool if I bring on Ty?
Yeah, sure.
All right, bringing him in. Welcome, Tiberius. How do you feel about
Hi.
purpose?
Good evening, friendos. How are you?
Doing good.
Good.
Yeah, long time no see, FQ.
Yeah, good to see you.
Yeah. Remind me of the question. You said, "What? How do I feel about purpose?"
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you got an hour?
at least.
All right. Well, I ain't gonna take an hour, but generally one of the first questions I'll ask if I actually was ever interested in somebody, and I'm not gonna get into the whole dating conversation, is do you feel like purpose is something that is like innately given to you, or is it something that you make for yourself? And I'm very much more on the side of I think it's something that you make for yourself. Um, I think one of you were saying it earlier, but I was kind of listening off to the side. I think it is something that you have to go find. Um, I have a really hard time with objectivism in the regard of, oh, hey, it should just be innate, it should be obvious. I'm like, yeah, it's only kind of obvious when I smoke a shitload of pot and then, like, actually have that conversation with myself about like why I feel the way I feel about stuff. But other than that, it's usually not obvious at all.
Yeah, no, I can feel that. I totally agree with you. And I've also thought some things were my purpose, and then come to find out that's definitely not my purpose and not something I want to continue doing. So I think our purposes are subject to change as well over time.
I think it's still getting older, but
Yeah. What
Um,
dating shows have you guys seen lately? I started watching this one about cheating, which I thought was very spicy on Netflix. Have you guys seen it?
I have not seen that, but like part of the reason why I wanted to talk about it was because I had Modi on last week, and he's like a dating show veteran, and he was kind of explaining how most of the dating shows he's on are purely for entertainment. Nobody's dating,
Yeah.
nobody's, getting together after
Yeah.
it's over and done with. And then you get this whole bubble pop thing, and then I think some of that is also like not real. But what's this
Mhm.
cheating thing? You think it's real, or is it just
Oh, no. I mean, it's the same. It's even more true, I'm sure, with like the Netflix shows, right? Like, I don't know if I believe that anybody actually gets married, like when you see these people at the altar. It's all scripting, you know that before. Like I've heard of like stories of people like going on to shows, and like it's the same thing. TV's sadly not that different, than these Twitch streams, dating shows. Um, but what's interesting is not whether or not it's real or not. What's interesting are the narratives that they try to show about each of the characters.
yes?
So, yes, that's what's interesting, right? You know that it's fake, right? But what are the writers trying to say about love and about relationships? And why do people behave as these characters, like when they hop on the show? What characters do you choose for yourself? So, for the show that I was watching, the premise of the show is these are all couples that are on their last legs. They're about to divorce. They're about to split up. They want to get married, but something's happened, right? And sometimes the something is that one of the parties cheated on the other party. Sometimes the problem is that there isn't enough money, and like one of the other, and they have conflicting career options that are happening. Like each of these couples have different problems, right? So all of these couples, they come to this island, and it's called a Temptation Island. So at the very beginning of the show, there are all of these scantily clad, beautiful women that come up that say that they're going to flirt with all of the men in these couples. And after that, all of these shirtless dudes, these him up, and they flex their muscles, and they say that they're going to flirt with all of the women, that are there in these relationships. And then the next episode, the next thing that happens is each of the couples, they split off, and they go on a quote unquote date, with a person that's supposed to attempt to woo them away, from the party that they arrived on the island with. So, it's very interesting to hear. Like one of the couples that that me and a friend watched, we watched this the other night, and it's just so obvious that this is supposed to be an old money couple. And that we have all sorts of theories, like, okay, clearly she doesn't care if he cheats. This is just about for appearances, okay? She cared that her family found out. And like we would do these voices, like, stop it, Reginald. I would have been fine if it was the maid, but did it have to be her? A person in our gym? It was scandalous, like it's that kind of thought, right? It's just fun, right? It's fun to sort of project, what you think is really going on. There's kind of a mystery solving aspect to watching these shows. And a lot of projection, I think, that makes it fun. I almost wonder though, like for the Twitch dating shows, I almost don't believe that all of it is as fake as people say it is, even though I'm sure that the person coming on to be chosen, I'm sure that she is not actually looking for a boyfriend, right? I'm sure that part of the show I think is probably completely fake, right? But have you seen the Netflix documentary about Jerry Seinfeld? It's on Netflix.
I have not. I'm interested though.
Well, one of the things that the Jerry Springer people talked about, like in that Netflix documentary, is a lot of people thought that they staged the show. They thought that they staged a lot of the fights. That they hired actors to come onto the show. And the people behind the scenes said, no, this is not the case. Are you kidding me? We were constantly trying to get people to fill that time slot every single day. We would spend hours on the phone calling people. Like people would call us trying to get people to come on the show because they just needed an never-ending glut of people to fire, in front of a camera. The people would come on, they would get them drunk, they would yell at them, they would try to, jazz them up before they got on the show. And sometimes people deliberately called into the show because they wanted to make a scene and they wanted to be famous. Like, it's not that didn't happen. But the Springer show, as far as and I think it's believable, they really weren't trying to put on a performance of these people hating each other or these people being crazy. And they didn't need to, because there was a never ending, and they were constantly soliciting, trying to find people to come on.
Okay, I
And
thought you said Jerry Seinfeld. No, you meant Jerry Springer. I was completely lost halfway through that.
no, this is the Springer documentary.
Okay.
And yeah, and that's honestly been more of my experience with Twitch, right? It would be really nice if there was a Twitch streamer and he had all the time and money on his hands that he could plan these elaborate reality TV arcs where he gets people to come on and he has a planned script. This is not what happens, okay? What actually happens is, and I'm sure Lethe, it's extremely hard to put a panel of people together. It's hard to get people to come on the same time, to get people to want to come on the show. People cancel, things happen. So how are you going to keep tons of people filling those slots? Well, you either need to have the same group of people that comes on every week, or you need to be constantly promoting the show to get new people on in front of the screen, right? It's almost impossible for you to be this mastermind that gets tons of crazy dramatic things happening all the time. I mean, I'm sure maybe there's somebody that can do it, right? I just don't think this is realistic, though. I think realistically, there probably are people who are coming, at least for the successful dating shows. If they're constantly bringing on new people, I don't think those shows are scripted. I think that those shows are probably pretty off the cuff. You probably have some people that want to goof off. You also probably have some people who are creepy and who think that it's real, though. I hate to say that, but let's be honest, the population that hops on Twitch is probably a population that uses OnlyFans. There are people that promote their OnlyFans on Twitch. It's not out of the realm of possibility, right? So
I somewhat agree with you. I don't know how much of Jerry Springer was scripted. I think they kind of had an idea and they did a screening process beforehand to see who was going to be the most unhinged when they bring them on. And I think that became the draw of how it works out. And I don't know if these people were honestly this or whatever, but I think what it does to the public is more what I find my interest in. Do people believe this is real? Do people believe this is how people are? Or do they think it's scripted? And I always have to wonder where that line is.
It's probably a mess of all three. But I think that part of why people want to believe that I don't think it's possible for a lot of these shows to be scripted. Would the people want them to be scripted? Yeah, I think they probably would. And I think they might want to try to have a more controlled format for the show. But again, realistically, I don't think that's possible for some of these shows, at least not if they want to have new guests coming on all the time. So I think that the real reason why people say, oh, the show is scripted, nothing you're seeing is real, is one, to sort of emotionally distance yourself from how terrible the people are on screen. So you don't want to admit, that people can be this awful. You don't want to admit to yourself that people can be this horrific on screen. It's easier to say to yourself, oh, this is just television. Oh, this isn't real, as opposed to saying, wow, these people really can be that awful. I think that might be part of it, is that people have like sort of want emotional distance from how bad people can be. And secondly, to not take responsibility for what it is that you're watching, right? I mean, like, honestly, right? Like, if you're watching, Jerry Springer and you're seeing, I'm sorry, girl is pregnant at 14 and her brother impregnated her, right? And you tell yourself, oh, well, this is just television. This is just make believe. This is just pretend, right? That means that you can watch that episode and not feel badly about the fact that you're making this episode, viable, right? Because your viewership is part of like what's keeping the show and keeping the lights on for the studio on, right? You want to keep watching it, so you have to believe that it's fake in order to give you a moral excuse to keep participating in that type of media. And to be honest with you, I think that that's kind of happening with Twitch, and I think that that's happening with streaming as well, which is when there's a dramatic blow up, when people are cruel or people are mean, I've noticed there's this thing that people usually say, which is, well, just log off, log off, go outside, smell the daisies,
some grass,
and then come back, like, like, why are you taking this so seriously? Don't you know this is just the internet? Don't you know this is just a computer? Don't you know this is all just, and they won't say this part, but this is like the undertone of it. Don't you know this is all just a video game anyway? Yeah. And it's not, it's not a video game, right? But people want to say that it's, yeah.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I'm trying to figure out which side has the bigger level of cope, honestly, because there's levels where a lot of people say exactly what you said. And then there's another level where I do see people who come in here very earnestly, very sincerely, to a degree where this is their hangout spot. This is where their boys are. This is where their friends are. Like, this is the realest some shit gets for some of these folks, right? I don't know if it's that one side is outright far more correct than the other, or if it is just like a collision course between like two different mantras of what the online space is supposed to be.
What do you think, Lethe?
I think there are a lot of characters in this space that come through just to feed their egos, and that's also something that I find to be somewhat dangerous, because it's allowing a platform for people to gain something that's going to build their ego up, or at least reinforce their ego, and allow for bad actors to all of a sudden gain a platform, which going back to like more the reality TV end of it, Danielle Bergoli was one of these individuals. I don't know how real the Dr. Phil episode was with Danielle Bergoli, but it allowed her to catapult herself into a level of stardom that could be deemed dangerous, and definitely is not something you want for society. So same thing goes with a lot of the Twitch people. Like, you find a lot of abusive shit going on with some of the bigger Twitch personalities that leads into terrible things, and them having fan bases that will protect them, or at least, rally behind them, allowing for those terrible outcomes to perpetuate. So I'd rather see more earnest people, but that's just not going to be nearly as interesting for most people, because people want to see the spectacle. They don't want to see the truth.
I split with you on this a little bit.
Sure.
I can't speak for the audience because I fucking hate the audience most of the time, but
hey, my
still love you,
Testy.
Well, we'll get to there later. Here's the thing that I've kind of noticed. There's a lot of characters on here. Some of them are very real. We've got our friend Kyle, as an example, that are just, pretty genuine from the start. And then there's some others that are very performative. We can talk about someone like Gibbs, right? Of the people between the reals and the people who are performative, I generally find that like a lot of the performative people are like hard coping and masking with shit. Like, this is not just, oh, hey, this is all for pretend. It's like, this is the only place they get attention. And so this is why they keep showing up.
I'll stick up for Gibbs here, though. I will say, as I will. I'm gonna be pro the Admiral. Okay. The infantry is landing. The Air Force has arrived. Okay. We got to protect our Navy. Okay. All right. Here's the deal, right? Like, yeah, Gibbs can be kind of ridiculous, and yes, he could say a lot of really ridiculous shit. It's true. Okay. The drone strikes on the Texas border and all that, right? But one, right? If we're being honest, a lot of these panel shows, man. I mean, I used to be on I've been on a lot of panel shows, okay? And a lot of these panel shows, they go on for a long time, okay? And they're on for a long time and you get tired, you know, you want something crazy to happen, okay? You're bored. You want somebody to start saying some wild shit because you want something to shake up and happen, you know? And Gibbs, God bless him, you know, he makes shit happen, you know? He tries to be entertaining, he tries to be funny, you know, he helps to fill in, you know, the soft moments like where nobody's talking, you know? He gets it, you know.
By
it is
screaming
about
at
being
Connor for
entertaining.
45 minutes.
Okay, but like when you're on a panel with him, you know, like he helps lighten the mood. You know, he's generous. He has kind of like a host mentality. You know, when he brings people onto his streams, right? He cares about being entertaining. You know, and that's part of being human to other people. Just to be honest, right? It is keeping that in mind about like when you're bringing people on, you know, when you're talking to people, it's important to be fun. It's important to be funny. It's important to try to make people happy while you're in it, to make it an enjoyable experience. And
Lethe, who does it
appreciated
better?
Gibbs for trying to lighten the mood.
Sorry, I had it cut out and I thought you guys were done.
Well, Ty was asking who does it well, between who and
Yeah,
who.
I was going to ask who does it better, Gibbs or Phil?
Ooh, Gibbs
No.
for sure. Gibbs is far more
Really?
fun than Phil. Phil is has a much bigger personality, but Gibbs is a lot more nuanced.
I got to think about that for a second. I'm a little biased. Actually, would totally take Phil over Gibbs.
I mean, when it comes down to like having a real conversation along with the performance, or like having some level of sincerity, or what's the word? Ability to make arguments. I'm going to say Phil is a lot more consistent.
The fact that you brought sincerity into this conversation makes me want to die.
Free KOE.
KOE, yeah.
Yeah, Phil KOE.
Oh God, KOE is great too. I'm sorry. I love that skull that he keeps on his desk. I love that he's like an unapologetic evangelical pastor and then he belts it out like he's like the cheeriest dude. You know, I think he's awesome. I think he's super fun. But like that's the thing, right? Like it's okay. I think it's okay. Like we did a while back. Actually, we should do it again. I really miss it. Stardust had these kangaroo courts that we would do, which was basically like it wasn't really a trial, it was a roast, right? You guys seen like the roasts that we've done in the past?
I remember playing it with
roasts.
playing one with you.
Yeah, no, it's super fun, right? One of them was the roast of Gibbs. Okay, so basically, like, we would find some silly thing to sort of riff off of somebody that we knew in the Twitch poll space. With Gibbs, it was that he was Mexican, right? So we accused him of being a fake Mexican, right? And we had all of these, like, wild jokes, you know. We had people trying to say that they were Gibbs's father. I played Gibbs's mother. I was a hippie, you know, that was, like, on shrooms. It was a whole thing. Okay, it was great. And like there was a previous one that we did, which was the trial of you guys have probably met him, Adarius. Actually, I don't know if you've met him, Lethe.
Oh,
have you met Adarius?
I've met Adarius, Adarius.
Oh. Yes. Okay, well then you understand, okay, why Adarius would be on trial in the first place. You probably know some reasons why. Well, we put him on trial as a roast, right? And it was sort of a fake trial, right? And it was hilarious. It was the greatest thing ever, okay? Everyone was like a character. People got dressed up. You know, people had a backstory. Those were two of the funnest streams I've ever been on because everybody sort of took a personality trait and they made it ridiculous. You know, they blew it up, you know, and they made it really fun to play with. I really hope that like the content of the future tries to do more of stuff like that because that was genuinely very enjoyable.
Who was the third one? Because I remember there was 3 of them, and I'm thinking it was Doobie, or Doobie was really involved with it. But I can't remember.
I only saw the Gibbs one. I didn't even know there was one for Poof.
I remember the Adarius one because I think that was the first one, and it went to his head, and he was a bigger cunt after it than he was before it.
Yeah.
Then there was one after that. I can't remember who it was, and then was Gibbs. And I'm trying to remember who the middle one is.
I don't think that we did a middle one. I don't remember doing, at least not one that we streamed anyway.
It might not have been streamed, but I can probably look it up.
Maybe there was. I don't think there was, but I could be wrong. If there was, I don't think I was a part of it. I just know that we had the Gibbs one and we had the Adarias one. But that was like awesome. Honestly, if we do it again, we should have like KOE on, like doing some kind of, I don't know. Like we should find people wanting to be ridiculous is what I'm saying, okay? To be characters like on like the next show. And we need to find somebody willing to be a victim also, okay?
See?
Somebody with a thick skin who could take being made fun of and who could be funny in response, okay?
That's Gibbs 100%, but that's definitely not KOE because that dude gets butthurt. So butthurt.
Oh, really? Oh, damn. Okay, so maybe not KOE. We need to find a new subject, is what I'm saying. Okay, I think that would be super duper fun. But yeah, no, I really hope the content of the future gets better. One thing that you said that I think is true, Kai, like, and this is maybe not as fun, but I think it's important to say, like, it really does feel like we're at the end of an era. Like that an era is ending like about now in this particular year, right? There's a lot of things that are ending. Trump is now not only is he in office, but he won the popular vote. It feels like MAGA has really swept the nation, right? The culture feels more conservative. There's been a shift in the wind with the way people talk about things. It feels like people today tilt more conservative than they would have like about 10 years ago. Maybe I'm reading the room wrong, but that's sort of the sense that I get like when I'm out in the world and when I'm talking to people. And that's the first thing. The second thing is the Pope died. Like, can we talk about the fact that Pope Francis is dead? Like, that's a big deal, man. Like, that's a really big deal. He was arguably one of the most liberal popes that we've had in a long time. He wrote about climate change. He wrote about Gaza. He was one of the most LGBTQ friendly popes possibly ever. I'd be curious to know if there has been a pope that has been more progressive, with queer issues than Pope Francis. Like, and it caused, a lot of controversy, like within the Catholic Church. It's going to be interesting to see. JD Vance murdered him. Yeah, he did. I don't know. Yeah. There's a terrible meme. It's fuck, marry, kill, and the first image is the couch. The second image is the wife, and the third is the Pope. There are so many things.
Have you seen the Clue one?
Oh my god. No, I haven't. What's the Clue one?
Meme is like JD Vance in the rectory with the incense burner.
Oh god. Yeah, like you just know though that whoever it is they're going to replace Francis with, it's going to be someone I feel they're good. I have a bad feeling, right? I've seen some of the candidates that they've proposed, and it seems like it's possible that they might try to choose, like I saw there was a pope from the Philippines. I saw that there were a couple of proteges of Francis. I saw there was a pope from Africa. So it seems like some of the popes are more liberal, or if they're not more liberal, they're trying to find popes that aren't from Italy. Like it does seem, because I saw like a very brief list of candidates. So it feels like maybe they're going to try to find a more diverse, at least, choice. But my hunch is that they're probably going to try to find an Italian conservative standard pope to replace him.
It's probably going to be a more conservative pope. I would almost guarantee it.
Yeah. I think that we're in for the reckoning of the Catholic Church. Like it would be, I'm curious to know like if the next pope even can undo like some of the stuff that Pope Francis did. Because he made it possible so that gay couples could receive a blessing, could be blessed by the Catholic Church, even though they can't be married in the Catholic Church, which I know caused like a stir in a lot of parishes. I would be curious if that can be repealed, and hopefully it's not. But I wouldn't be surprised if the next pope tries to do something like that. So we're going to see probably some scary things coming up soon. So I'm not terribly excited. We'll see. Fingers crossed, that the next pope isn't like too, much of like giving, I don't know, isn't like too far right, but we'll see.
I would be kind of shocked if this person was, because I talked about this with Rich about a year ago, not because we were just planning on the Pope dying, but more just, kind of future casting what the Catholic Church was going to do. We've had this Pope, which has been in for quite a bit. We had the last Pope, which was kind of closeted on how liberal he was, and then you had the guy before him, which was John Paul II. A lot of the cardinals that have been appointed should be of the decently liberal breed of people who have been not radically, but at least significantly wanting to change the church, because they know they're kind of getting left in the dark when it comes to the Western world and outside of like sub-Saharan Africa, where they've been able to make some level of ingress. They've been losing out on a lot of levels, and I think they've realized that they kind of need to change, or they're going to die out as an institution.
Yeah, but the trad cath response to that is the reason why they're losing out is because like the church has become more liberalized. Like I know that like you can find like Catholics, you can find people that are more conservative, like Catholics in particular, who will say, that part of the reason why Catholicism isn't, as popular is because it's become less traditional. Like I've noticed that like things have been like, I've noticed people who are Catholic doing things that are not just more traditional, but like almost seem extremist in nature. Like Latin masses, that was something that, Vatican II resolved for the most part, right? it was revolutionary. You could hear a Catholic mass, in English, in your own language. You didn't have to go to the Latin mass. You had girls could be altar servers. You didn't have to be a boy in order to be an altar server. That was something that was changed in the Catholic Church. But now, I'm seeing, like Catholic women wearing veils. Now that's a trend that's become recent, when just 10 years ago, like, I don't think that was not as much of a trend. And maybe it's just the circles that I run in. Like, I accept that I could be biased, but it does feel that there is a growing faction of Catholics who were dissatisfied with the church being liberalized. And the response to this has been to try to become ultra or weirdly conservative in the reverse.
I don't want to, how do I say this? I don't want to push back on what you're saying, because one, from what I remember, is that you come from generally the more conservative side of Catholicism, at least from my, what I remember from your personal background. And then the other side of this is that there's usually an equal and opposite reaction that we have, and we've had a pretty significantly strong push from the Catholic Church to, change. I don't think we're just seeing this within Catholicism. I think we're seeing this without Christianity as a whole, is that it's kind of separating. It's either kind of going the route of Judaism, where it's either generally semi-secular, where it's like, yeah, we believe in faith, we do the cultural markers that like they're literally kind of adopting the cultural Christian moniker, right? And then the other side of it is like, no, we're going to like go full bore into, yeah, we've lost our way. We're going to have to like revert the doctrine 100 years because this shit's just ridiculous. This used to be a Christian society, and now the atheists call more shots.
What?
Well, also too, right? Letha, you mentioned like before, like the birth rate discourse, just to sort of circle this into like the question, right? Like Andrew Wilson is an ortho bro, right? Like, and like when you think about like a lot of like it's true though, it's true, right? Like,
you're gonna trigger me.
I'm sorry.
Continue.
But it's true, right? He's Orthodox Catholic. It's the particular denomination that he's under. When I have heard religious Christians complaining about the birth rate, they tend to be either orthos or they tend to be like Roman Catholics, right? Generally speaking, there are some Protestants who complain about it, but not as much. And I think that part of the reason for this is that Protestantism like spreads differently. I mean, you evangelize, right? You are saved by Christ. You have to go out into new lands to different people to try to convert people to join your faith, right? That's what it is, right? To be you're proselytizing. You're a Mormon. You're knocking on door to door, right? Asking, have you heard the good news? Would you be interested to read this book? It's very helpful. Like, that's what you do if you're a Protestant. If you're a Catholic, the way that you spread the faith is by having lots and lots of babies. That's how you spread the faith, right? I mean, it's not that there aren't occasionally Catholic converts, like it does happen. There are people that convert to Catholicism, But that's not really the strategy of preserving the faith within Catholicism. And this may hurt some people's feelings, people that are Catholic, but it's not entirely possible, I don't think, to convert to Catholicism, because there are just aspects to being Catholic that if you weren't raised Catholic, if you didn't grow up in the Catholic Church, if you weren't baptized, if you don't have that socialization like as you're being raised, it's going to be very hard for you to understand, when you come in your 20s or in your 30s or in your 40s. And I think like it's similar to being Jewish, and it's similar to being Muslim in that way. Like, I think that if you talk to people who are Jewish or you talk to people who are Muslim, they would probably say the same thing to you too, which is that, yeah, there are people that convert to Islam, and yes, there are people that convert to Judaism, but the people that convert tend to be more zealous than they need to be. And it's very clear that even if they know the encyclicals, even if they know the tenets of the faith better than you, there's a cultural aspect to being a part of these religions that they don't fully understand, or they can't fully integrate like once they join. I don't know. I don't think that's as true like as if you're Protestant.
I mean, there's a certain level of ritual that comes with being in the Catholic Church that I don't think a lot of people are going to want to assimilate into. But I think if that's what you're looking for, it's kind of going to work out for you. Because I know when I was doing junior ROTC, to get out of doing PT in the morning, you could go to church. But the only church on the base was a Catholic church. I'm going to say one session in that Catholic church had me back running my miles for the morning.
Okay.
Because the constant up and down, the side, like the kneeling and all the weird things that they do just was not up my alley as a Baptist Christian at the time.
It's like Pilates, but you're praying, okay?
Yeah, I was getting a workout either way. Like, this isn't getting me out of PT. This is a different form of PT where I have to say things I don't want to say.
I definitely noticed when
Yes.
I ever went to Mass, it always felt like a little bit of a workout.
Just quads humming when you get out of church.
A little bit.
Yeah, no kidding. No, it's true.
But there's a lot of mixed feelings about this Pope.
It'll be interesting.
A lot of people feel like he went too far in one direction. Some people think he didn't go far enough and damn him for that. So it's just really interesting the mixed feelings that people had about this particular Pope.
Yeah. I think it's because he liberalized the Catholic Church to a degree that previous popes really didn't push. It's going to be interesting to see how the Catholic Church responds to this, because, I'm just speaking about this, like just connecting this back to what I said before with Andrew Wilson, right? Like, if you're thinking about it from a purely cold
Oh, you cut out.
If you want your faith to grow, right? If you don't want to lose, tons of Catholics. Yeah. Well, if you don't want to lose like tons of Catholics being initiated into the faith, right? How are you going to do that? And probably I would guess that you're probably going to go the more conservative route. You're probably going to try to encourage families. You're probably going to try to encourage women to have more kids, right? Because you want to try to continue, to propagate the faith, would be my guess. And this isn't even just personally, but whether it's good to do that or bad to do that. I'm just meaning it from like a business, management perspective, right? If you want to maintain your population, from that perspective, that probably is like what the next pope is going to say. So I'm not terribly optimistic about like what the future is going to be here.
Cool if I bring in Twisted?
Absolutely.
Oh, sure.
Cool. Grabbing him. What's good, Twisted?
What's going on? How y'all doing?
Talking about
I'm
the
okay.
Pope
Doing pretty good. How about you?
Traditional values being upheld through having a bunch of religious babies.
Gotcha.
Twisted wouldn't know anything about that.
Neither religion nor babies.
Never mind.
So
Okay.
I think we've had like there was another dude that was in my server for a while, and he ended up going the ortho route and was saying how religious people are going to have more babies, which is something that Elon Musk also said, like, in order to get people to have more babies, we need to give them less education and give them more religion. But he also said that in the future, these jobs are going to be taken up by machines. So we're going to need universal basic income for everyone to make up for what's going on in the workforce. So I find it really interesting, the dichotomy of what they're pushing forward for the future.
Yeah.
I have a
I mean,
bunch of religious
I
babies that
listened to
don't work.
this. I
You
mean,
mean like
to
right
be honest,
now?
yeah. I mean,
Go
like,
ahead.
this is like the problem, right? Like, you're going to wind up with like mass unemployment. And with that, you are going to have like higher crime rates. I mean, this is what happens, like when people have a ton of babies that they can't afford, right? Statistically, the outcome of that is that those babies grow up into kids that get into trouble, right? They don't grow up into productive citizens. It's unfortunate, but it's the statistical reality of like what's going to happen if you have kids that you weren't prepared to take care of. So yeah, I agree with you, Leafy. I don't think that it makes I don't think it makes sense from a planning perspective. But if you look at it from the perspective of how are you going to get this population of men to get married? Because I think that like why do we care about like having, getting women to marry men that they don't want to marry? Why is that a concern here? Because that's really like what this is about, right? We need to have more babies. Okay. Who needs to have more babies? Well, younger women, it's women of the working class that they want to have that's who they're concerned about, right? Women in their 30s, women who go off to college, like they are statistically more likely to get married, they're more likely to stay married, right? So if it's this particular group of people, right? How are you going to get that? Why are you trying to get these people to get married, right? Well, I think it's because you have a lot of angry young men, okay, who are from working class backgrounds, who are finding it more difficult than they have historically been used to get partners. And when you have a ton of angry young men who feel like they can't find partners, this causes strife, right?
Mhm.
This is what causes them to get into trouble. It's what causes them to get into, to become violent. They become problems and that externalize into the rest of society, right? You want to try to lower the bar to try to get this population of men to shut up, would be my guess. Or because like people think that this population of men is maybe politically important and maybe they can be used to try to boost like political goals that people have. And so they're trying to swoop them in as sort of this promise, right? Vote for me, right? And then I'll make it easier for you to get hitched.
Ooh, there was this thing that I heard about recently. I can't remember what it was called, but it's like a show where they have these girls who are like party girls, but they've like come over to religion, and so they're like talking purity culture and like I can't remember what it was called. I have to look it up.
While you're looking it up, I'll punch on a couple of things that she was saying,
Please
not
do.
only just a moment ago, but a little while ago. I think that we're seeing, to a large degree, exactly what she said regarding a bunch of grifters who largely have a bunch of axes to grind, who are kind of dominating like the red pill space, right? Because you guys were talking about Tate and a few others, if I remember correctly.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it blows my mind because I don't know if I'm just wise enough at the age of 33 that I, recognize a spade for a spade, but look at all the men who are running these shows, whatever podcast, take your shots wherever you want. Almost all these dudes are single. Almost all these dudes, don't even have kids, right? Or if they do, like, they're very much like out of wedlock or like serial divorcees, that kind of thing. Like it's, progressively like who is the most antisocial people you can when it comes to maintaining stable relationships, and then you have a bunch of these young men flock to this message. I largely agree. It's just a easy, quick way to get rich off of people's insecurities and people's pain. Here's the problem with the dating scene writ large from looking at towards the younger folks that I'm looking at. Yeah, the dudes are getting more conservative, some more aggressively than others, and depending on where you are, some more, radically. But what we're seeing also is the women are getting more liberal. We're actually kind of like politically separating by sex for the younger generations. It's just women are like, if you don't believe that I have the right to an abortion, you have no right to date me, and I'm not going to even be anywhere near around you. And young men feel the exact opposite way. I'm kind of wondering, and I'm not trying to be a doomsayer when I say this, but at least for young people under 25, it seems like the hope for having any kind of decent, stable relationship is getting significantly harder.
Why do you say that?
I think it's also.
No, go ahead, please.
Oh, I was going to say, I think that part of what this is that a lot of this particular group of men is recognizing that what they're competing with isn't Chad. They're competing, with your job, with your smartphone, with all of the things that you prefer to do with your time. There was a blog post. It's her Substack is awesome, by the way. You should definitely check her out. His name is it's called Cartoons Hate Her. Great Substack. Definitely should give it a read. And what she it's really good. And she's a feminist. She writes a lot of really great articles. And one of the articles that she wrote about was there's this perception that's propagated on these podcasts that the reason why it's so difficult for a lot of these guys to find girlfriends is because a lot of these girlfriends are only swiping for the 1%ers. They have to have somebody that's 6'5", that makes six figures, and loves golden retrievers and is amazing at sex. And they have such incredibly high standards that it's impossible for any normal average guy to meet. And they're completely out of their league. And the argument that she makes, like within that Substack, is actually most of these women are not off dating Chad. They are not off, with 6'5", millionaires, and that's the only thing that will do for them. That's not why. The reason why is because they simply haven't found somebody that is their spark. And this was like sort of the selling point that like the Cartoons like Hate Her Substack had, which is that like the different sexes have different cards. They have different things that are in their favor. Men, what's in their favor is that men are better with fertility. Men are able to have babies up until you die, right? You're able to reproduce. You can have babies with anyone up until you're in your 90s. Well, that's an advantage. It's not fair, but it's something that men have over women. Here are the cards that women have over men. Women are less likely to settle, and they feel less motivated to settle. One of the things that she argues, which I think is true, when you think about things like sex and relationships, and you compare the desire between men and women, what they want, women are more capable of living without sex, are more capable of living without romantic relationships than men. And the consequence of this is they don't have to settle. They don't feel the same impetus to settle as much as men. So, and the other thing that she said that I think is also true, that it's not that you have some enormous standard for height or for sex or for money. It's the X factor, right? It's what we talked about, Lethe. It's she will date a short man. She'll date a hairy man. She'll even date a broke man, right? She'll date any guy that's from like these categories. But she wants the guy to be someone that's special. She wants him to be someone who she genuinely loves, who genuinely she has that spark, that connection with. And for a lot of women, they simply do not and can't find that with a lot of guys. And so for that reason, they choose to remain single rather than simply settling and marrying somebody that they don't feel that way towards. And they feel that they can afford not to settle for somebody that they don't really like. So I think that
doubly attacked. First, the Italian hate here is incredible. First, we got to find a pope that's not Italian. Now it's anti-hairy men. Jesus Christ, I feel attacked. Holy fuck!
I'm sorry, dude. No, like I think it's just true, right? And I think that I think that this is actually like what people are competing against. This is what guys are competing against. They're not competing against some Chad on Tinder. They're competing against, your job, against your hobbies, against the other things that you'd prefer to do in your everyday life. And as a consequence of this, I think that's exactly what a lot of this is literally like why part of well, not literally, it's not the only reason why. It's a contributing factor to why I think a lot of guys don't want you to pursue your career and don't want you to really have hobbies and don't want you to have a life outside of them, because they know that if you do, that they will have to compete with your job, right, for your attention to be with them. This is another quote. It's from.
Do you really think it's that prevalent that guys don't want a woman to have a career and stuff? I mean, I don't see that as being that prevalent, at least not in my circles, right? Most of my friends are storm chasers, and typically their significant others, if they have one, um, have their own career or are also chasers, right? And then, my girlfriend is a trauma surgeon. I don't know. I just don't think it's that prevalent that's,
Well,
I don't know.
yeah, I don't think for average people it is. Like, I don't think that like people that are out in the world that have girlfriends, this is not who I'm talking about, right? Like, I think that like ordinary people that have girlfriends, that have wives, I don't think like this is not the cohort of people that even would want this sort of thing. But I'm talking about like the sort of people that watch the whatever podcast, right? The sort of people that is the red pill incel audience, right? And why they feel drawn towards this particular wing of politics. And I think it's because that's what they feel like they're competing up against. And I would agree with you. I think that like there is a higher expectation amongst a lot of couples that both men and women work to financially contribute to the relationship. And I think that even in traditional relationships where men claim to not want women with careers, the mask always slips with that, right? So a lot of guys that say that like they're really traditional, that they want their wife to be home cooking and cleaning and all of this stuff, right? They'll say all of these things, right? But then eventually something will come out that sounds like, really? She's going to sit at home on her ass all day and mooch off of me and lie on the couch and eat bonbons and watch the soaps, while I'm off slaving away and breaking my ass to make a living? Really? And like for this particular group of men, I think they have to make the choice, do you value the aesthetic of tradition more than the convenience that the money offers you by allowing her to go out to work, right? Do you want to have the idea of having a woman stay home, cook and clean and make things for you more than you want that extra $50,000, supplemented on top of the income that you make, right? And I think for a lot of guys, I think for a lot of people, they would prefer to just have the money.
I pretty much agree with you. I think the bigger issue when it comes down to that is because women, they don't have a problem with women having careers or having money, is that they have more money than them or they can't provide what they think they should be providing. And it breeds like a level of inadequacy, which I also think shouldn't be the case.
I would agree with.
Look, I drive into tornadoes for a living. My dick is big enough. I'm not worried about my girlfriend making more money than me.
I mean, I wish this was most people, but it just doesn't seem to be for a lot of people, especially younger people. So like the younger groups.
Yeah, I mean, that's true. I'm in a little bit different scenario. I had my military career, retired, and now do this. And I'm also in my late 40s and, kind of been there, done that, established, blah, blah, blah. So a bit different than somebody in their 30s like Ty that's just in the dating pool, blah, 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 right?
Yeah, I'm going to remove myself from that one, but that's a whole other conversation.
Fair enough. We'll have that convo when I give you a call.
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, you're pretty well caught up with everything, so you shouldn't be too bad.
Here's a quote that I think is kind of interesting. That it's from a different Substack. I'll see if I can find like the Substack, but I think it speaks to like what I was saying before. I think that a lot of nostalgia economics is about gender roles. Were people actually richer in 1965 than in 2025? No, of course not. And no amount of torturing the economic data will make that true. It is also not true that men were richer in 1965 than in 2025. Nor is it true that blue-collar men were richer in 1965 than in 2025. But what is true is that the majority of the economic gains over the past 60 years have been accrued to women rather than to men. This purely relative loss in status turns out to have some implications for men's absolute well-being. Women are, as a result of economic empowerment, less desperate to date, marry, or stay married to the average man. Now, of course, nobody is going to come out and say, I favor policies that would make men somewhat poorer and also make women a lot poorer, because I think in this poorer society, girls will be desperate to go out with me Because if you said that, you'd sound like an evil moron. So it feels better to convince yourself that people were actually richer 60 years ago. And that's why you're nostalgic for the good old days. But it's not true. And that's kind of, and I don't think this is true for people that have girlfriends or people that are actually married. Like, I don't think this is true for a lot of people. But for this specific group of people that engage in nostalgia economics, that yearn for the 50s, that yearn for the 60s, that talk about, like trad wives and returning to tradition and how much better things would be. I think that for this particular group of people, I think that this is the underlying thing that's happening that's not really being said.
There's levels where I think that's true, and there's levels where I don't. There's definitely this weird everything was better yesterday thing that even a lot of younger people have picked up, which on a level, I mean, if you're under 30, like, it's just been one crisis after crisis, so like believing that the days before were better is not completely deranged. But on the other side of this is that I largely agree that at least a lot of this is some level of animus to where with women being able to largely be self-sufficient or independent, is that they don't have nearly as many reasons to be tied on to a man. And I'm just going to say it the way that I can say it. Men can't fucking shape up for this shit. For some reason, as much pressure as they feel to get laid is that they can't actually be bothered to make it to where, they actually care about their partners after the first 3 months. Or, they can't be bothered to maintain that one job that they were really searching for. The list goes on. There's a couple of things I want to throw at my fellow gentlemen for. The one thing that I do give to this argument is that, overall, incomes are technically better than what they used to be. We're also spending more than ever, and that goes into the whole, why is a house now 6 times the yearly income instead of, 3? Why is it that getting a lot of the major assets that you want to get, like a car, is so much more expensive than what it used to be? Some of these things are now getting to the point where they're unaffordable, and, if we're going to be partners with one another, it helps to be able to afford a house, and none of us can anymore.
And I think
when it comes to, I don't know about houses, but when it comes to cars, you got to look at what a 70s car consists of versus a 2025 car. A 70s car is going to last you 3 or 4 years before it's rusting in a pile of garbage ready for the scrap heap. 2025 car, if you maintain it, you can get 10, 15, 20 years out of it, right?
That's if you can drop the $70,000 to get it, but yeah.
And then you have the level of technology that's gone into them. You have, and this is the reason, I'm not saying whether it's good or bad, right? You have the levels of technology that are now in these cars. You have the safety standards that are in these cars, the fuel economy requirements that are in these cars. All of this requires research and development and implementing more and more expensive items into these vehicles. So when it comes to cars, I see that the price increase for not price increase adjusted for inflation is valid. There could definitely be a case made for a manufacturer somewhere to pick up a simple bare bones car, no power steering, no AC, blah, 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 that you could pick up for 10 or 15 grand. Right.
I mean, we can make the same argument for houses, right? One of the big problems
they've
that we're
gotten
having
bigger. They've gotten larger.
They've gotten huge compared to what they were, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
So I get the thing. It's one of those deals where we're kind of having a problem where we want our cake and we want to eat it too. I'll make that conservative argument, but there is a level where, guys, I have a 950 square foot house, and regardless of the fact that I own the damn thing, it's doubled in value in 7 years. What the fuck?
What are you doing here, Ty?
Some of that is, again, what's being built. When you go out and you drive around, and you see new neighborhoods, what are the homes that are being built? They aren't the 950 or 1,500 square foot starter homes.
2,500 plus.
2,500 plus, exactly. So yeah, I don't feel like we have a housing shortage in the United States. We have a starter housing shortage in the United States. Builders aren't building 1,100 square foot cookie cutter homes in a neighborhood in the suburbs. That's not what they're building. They're building 2,500 is a small home these days for what these builders are building.
Yeah, I'm with you on that
right?
part.
When I had my house built, the builder straight up told me the minimum size we build is a 3,500 square foot home.
Jesus.
So, like here in California, because most people can't afford the housing, they started building what looks like condos, but they're calling them homes, and they're pricing them at like closer to 30,000 for these homes. And like,
is these the shipping container homes?
I mean, it's not even shipping containers. They literally look like apartments, but they're not apartments because that's not what they're labeled as. And I think they may have garages or whatever and like little tiny yards in front of them, but they're little tiny homes for the most part that I'm guessing are closer to 700 square feet at best. And I mean, they're super expensive.
So that's what you're seeing built around here.
300,000, sorry.
That's what you're seeing built around here for quote unquote starter homes. They're not building single family homes. They're building condos.
And that's what it seems like, but they're not calling them condos and they're slapping huge price tags on them.
Well, to be fair, Letha, you live in like second to Hawaii, you live in the highest cost of living in the United States. So yeah, you're huge price tag. You're the exception, not the rule.
Yeah, I'll send Tiberius a picture of this.
Yeah, I'll take pictures. I was just trying to make the point, like, even starter homes are becoming unaffordable, and we're getting to the point where even like a mid-level home isn't a mid-level home anymore, right? Like a 1,700 square foot home, good luck finding that. The boomers won't fucking sell it. Exactly. Like, they're gonna die in those homes. It's like, bitch, you can't get up the stairs. Why won't you sell your home? Oh, because you want $400,000 for it.
Yeah, these things don't go cheap, unfortunately.
These things look like shit.
Yeah, I'm saying I wouldn't want to live in that, and I definitely don't want to pay $300,000.
Where'd you send it, Lacey?
Oh, I'll send.
He sent it to me.
Oh, he sent it to you directly. Gotcha.
I'll send it to you as well if you want to see.
Because he doesn't make the side chat available in this room.
I do not.
Jerk.
So that's pretty much what it looks like. I'll send it to FQ as well.
Jesus.
FQ, I sent you the thing I was talking about. It's called Girls Gone Bible.
Okay, let me see.
That looks horrible for a living space.
Yeah, and I'm talking it's like 300,000 for those things.
Oh, it's 300,000 for that?
300,000.
Holy
This is
balls.
300,000. Wow,
Yeah, these things. Oh, sorry.
That's crazy.
Yeah, that's pretty much what it is. So,
and that's for one unit, isn't it?
Yeah,
it's not even for like the double.
For a duplex. That's crazy.
Like, here's the problem though. Like, we've got duplexes that have been built up around where Sprout lives, right? I just went up to visit him the other day, and shit, like, that kind of looks like that, but actually nicer. Or at least for what I aesthetically find nicer. I mean, some of those are going for like 110 here, which is obscene. Like, stuff like before COVID, shit like that would barely go over 60.
Something like that, yeah. Here would be 60 or 70 pre-COVID.
And now
don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that there's not a dramatic increase in housing prices across the board.
You're just milking it because you're a landlord.
Well, actually, I've gotten more out of residential now. I'm doing commercial.
Well,
I bought 2 strip malls and a storage unit.
Okay.
Yep.
Nice.
Yep. Sold 4 of the homes and houses that I had, and wound up doing that too. So
we got to catch up.
Only houses I'm keeping are the ones that I rent to traveling nurses, that kind of stuff. Other than that, I'm going strictly commercial.
I got you. I got a friend who's doing the traveling folks.
But yeah, they like I
Am I-
said, don't get me wrong. There's definitely a housing price increase relative to income across the board.
Gotcha.
Absolutely.
I heard FQ for just a second. What were you saying?
Yeah.
Oh no.
Girls Gone Bibble.
Oh no. No, I was just gonna ask, and I could be. Listen, I have not been following the tariff stuff at all. Okay, I'm a complete dumbass when it comes to that conversation. So I'm genuinely asking. Okay, am I wrong for thinking that there were a lot of boomers who were complaining about their retirements, being destroyed by recent events in the economy? Am I wrong for thinking that? I could have sworn, like I saw this. I could have sworn I've seen like a couple of people like making those complaints.
I've seen
Well,
it, but
I've-
there's. Go ahead, Twisted, because you're friends with older people than even I am.
Yeah, I was gonna say there's a mix because when you talk about boomers or even like late Gen X, there's a mix of people who still get pensions, right? Like my dad, he gets a pension, but then you have the boomers that were closer to the Gen X timeline that got in on the 401k instead of the pension, right? The people with the 401ks are seeing dramatic decreases in the value of their 401k due to recent events. And
Yeah.
that does have a large impact on retirement, So it really
Then-
varies. So you're going to see a very varied reporting on that between different individuals, depending on if they have a pension or if they have a 401k.
One thing I want to add to this.
My retirement in the military, I'm 49. I retired from the military as a pension. I didn't have a 401k. So I'm not impacted by that. But a lot of people that are sitting on 401ks.
I got one thing to add, and that is I have talked to quite a number of people who are like getting close to retirement or, are just kind of on the other side of retirement to where they're kind of drawing into the 401ks and whatnot. I've had I know one for sure, but maybe two that's just like, well, I voted for Trump, but I don't think I can retire now. Like this person is literally like 65, was planning on retiring.
Yeah.
No, 66. He was wanting to retire this year, and now he was just like, I don't know what to do now, because like I think he said he lost like 40% of his value off of that within the last couple of months, which obviously is a nightmare. And a lot of people saw that during COVID. But there's a lot of other folks that I've seen talk about this, and granted, some of these people are like, in their 50s or like 62, and they're just like, yeah, I lost a shitload, but I voted for Trump, and I think he's going to make it all better. And I don't know if it's cope, or I don't know if it's they actually just believe that, they're going to get the 2019 economy, back here in a year or two, and they're just going to be doing great. But I can at least say one person that I've talked to is mortified.
Well, I only bring up the boomer thing because, I mean, again, I'm a dumbass. I don't know anything. So, but if like Letha, you just mentioned like a lot of boomers, like they don't want to sell their houses. They've been saving for retirement. They refuse to leave. Like if a lot of boomers, though, as I'm sorry, I think you said your name was Twisted. If like what Twisted said is true, though, like if a lot of people are seeing their 401ks depreciate in value, and they want to retire, like, wouldn't it make sense just to sell your big giant house and to downsize, to a cheaper condo? Like, is that what we're going to see here in the next few years? Is a lot of houses going up on the market I don't know if that's like a dumb thing to say or not, but if it's true that like people are seeing their 401ks depreciate in extreme value, it would make sense for people to want to sell, their assets if they just want to get ahead and retire.
I don't know. I think it really depends. You get attached to a home, especially if you're getting up in retirement and, like let's lay my dad as an example. He lives in about a 3,200 square foot home. But my grandfather, and some other elders built the house themselves by hand. He raised us kids in that house after he retired from the military. My mom and him lived in that house until she passed away. You would have to shoot him to get him out of that home. There is no way in hell he will ever leave that house until he leaves in a box.
There's one thing that I can actually give to like the nostalgia of the boomers when it comes to their homes. I correct me if I'm wrong, but they are the generation who has lived the most in a single home, and they're also the generation who has renovated their homes more than any other
Correct
generation before.
Correct.
So yeah,
my dad
I get it.
put several remodels in that home. He had a swimming pool put in over the year. Just all kinds of different stuff that he's done to improve it. It's in a neighborhood. He bought part of the farm behind the neighborhood so he could have all that extra land back there that went up behind the neighborhood. So, yeah, like I said, that's his home. He won't leave that home until he's in a box.
I mean, I understand what you're saying, and I do think it's true that especially as you get older, especially if you've helped to build a house, like you have a personal attachment to the house and you've lived in it your entire life and you love it. But I know my grandma, like my grandma is a boomer, okay? She has this gorgeous, beautiful house, okay? It's by well, I don't want to give too many details, okay? But she has put a lot of renovations into this house. It's got a beautiful kitchen. It's gorgeous, beautiful house. She's got a great big garden, It's by the water. It's this beautiful, sparkling house, okay? It's got a balcony, tons of land. And she is at the point in her life where she is too old and she just can't take care of it. It's a huge amount of lawn to mow. She needs to hire a person to come in to mow the lawn. The property taxes to pay them off every month, excuse me. It's a lot to maintain and to keep up the house. The big garden that she loved to take care of. Like when her partner died, it really wasn't possible for her anymore. There's a huge amount of space at my grandma's house, that she has, no ability to make any use for. The house is too big for somebody with so few people living there for her to justify the cost for anymore. And that's and I know that while it's definitely true that a lot of people have personal attachments to their houses, I also know that there are lots of people when they get older, they dream of that condo in Florida by the beach, man. They don't want to be mowing the lawn and paying tons of taxes and looking at Lavinia. They dream of going to Florida. Snowbirds are a thing, right? What's Florida famous for? It's famous for people going down there to retire. Older people like warmer weather. Why would you leave the house that you've spent your entire life renovating and taking care of? Because it's too expensive for you to take care of. It's too big and it's too difficult for you to take care of it anymore. And C, you just want to retire. You want to go to Florida. You want to go and drink beer by the beach. You want you want to look at the ocean in your final days. I mean, I don't think this is true for everyone. I think there are some people, like as Twisted said, that probably would refuse and don't want to leave their houses. But I also think that there are lots of people who, even if they love their houses and even if they took really good care of them, they can't take care of themselves anymore. And they can't afford to take care of these houses anymore. So they're going to have to sell their houses in order to try to downsize.
Well, I think you're going to see some of that happen, right? That's going to happen. But like Ty was saying, I'm Gen X, so I kind of straddle between you guys as millennials and the boomer thing. The boomer generation is the one that has the most unlikely to do that. They keep the most nostalgia for that house, the most, because they've been in there for so long. They put so much work into the home over the years, right? So you're going to see some of that, but you're going to see a lot that are like my dad that aren't going to leave until they're drawn out in a box. And then a lot of that generation also owns what you'd classify as the starter homes, the 12 to 1,700 square foot homes that aren't too much for them as they get older, right? So they're not going to sell. Why would they sell and try to buy? And you also have to look, why would they sell and then try to buy something in the current economic environment, the housing market, right? It doesn't make sense to do that for them at that age, right? When they might have 10 years left till they pass on. So, but to go back to what you're saying about retiring to warm, there's going to be a contingent that does that too. So, what is the youngest age for boomer right now, Ty? You're into demographics.
I got to do the math on that.
Have they all retired by now, or they're still?
Nope. No, they have not. Give me a second here. I think it's 60, but let me double check that real quick.
It's saying 61 and 79.
It's 60.
61. So the vast majority have retired.
Yeah.
So the next big retirement wave is going to be Gen Xers, my generation, right?
You won't have a big retirement wave. There's not enough of you.
That's true. That is true. But there's a lot of truth to that, you know. And like Ty was saying about boomers having so much attachment, I already bought my retirement place. You know, I use it as a vacation home right now for off of the storm season. You know, I spend October through April in Hawaii. When I retire, I'm selling this place. Now I'm getting the fuck out of here and going to Hawaii full time because fuck Ohio.
How can you afford that shit? Never mind. I know how loaded you are.
Yep.
I hope you have a blast, but
there's going to be a lot of guys, people like me, right?
Mm-hmm.
That are more into moving out of their quote unquote home area when they retire. So now what you're asking, Paul, or Paul? Why did I just call you Paul?
That Tiberius.
I hope you're not talking to me.
No, not at all.
All right. Well, I'm gonna not try to assume anything out of that.
Yeah. Don't. I was thinking back to the Italian hate earlier, right?
I gotcha. Couple of things out of that. Number one is that are you planning on storm chasing even as a retiree?
I mean, technically, I'm a retiree now. You know that.
Wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
Yeah, but probably not. When I say retire, it's when I decide to hang up the storm chasing hat and everything and move to Hawaii full time.
Gotcha.
When I'm there, I'll probably, you know, I got my scuba license now, open water diving license.
Oh, for fuck's sake! I can't wait to see 60-year-old you in a fucking scuba suit. Going around everywhere.
I'll probably buy an amphibious plane, kind of just fly around the islands, and you know, right now when I'm in Hawaii, I rent one. We go out and fish off the pontoons out in the water.
Well, you deserve it, Colonel, but still.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome. Do you have any storm chasing plans coming up, particularly on a weekend? Because I'd like to tag along with you a little bit.
I'll have to run the models. I'm home at least for this weekend. Because I'm doing some things with my dad and sister.
Sure.
We're going up to the Air Force Museum and doing a couple things. But after that, I don't know. I'll have to look at what the models are forecasting and get back with you.
For the museum, if Dayton wasn't a complete pain in the ass for me to get to, I'd do it.
You'd be welcome to join us.
Give me a date and time, and I might, because I don't have any plans this week.
Saturday, day after tomorrow.
Okay, what time?
Good question.
Well, y'all
we usually get up there when it opens,
I wanted to
so
ask
probably 9 a.m.
FairyQueen what she thought about the Girls Gone Bible.
Sure, go ahead. We can get back to the normal conversation.
I actually haven't watched it. I've been listening and taking care of my puppy here for a second. Do you mind if I take a look at it for just a quick hot second?
Well, if you hit YouTube, there's shorts. I just couldn't get the shorts without getting sound on it. So if you want to grab a short, you can definitely see it.
I see. Okay. Well, this
How
one's
is the
48 minutes, the one that you sent me.
Yeah, they do a full podcast, and like recently there was some controversy with some of the people on the podcast because they got videos put out of them in less than flattering, less than demure lights.
I see. Okay, here, I'm going to just send you. This is the first short that I found. Here, and I'll send it to you. This is the first short. I don't know.
Yeah,
I've
it's
not watched
pretty
this
much
short. I
this.
don't know. That's pretty much what it
Yeah,
is.
pretty much
Okay.
any of those you can watch, and like one of them says God cured her alcoholism in like a week.
Yeah, oh God. Yeah. Yeah. So the videos, I'm assuming we mean sex tapes. When
Yes,
her sex
well,
tapes are
close to
nude were
like
released.
basically them partying and like twerking and drinking and all these things that they say they don't do.
I see. This was released by like an angry friend or like an angry ex-boyfriend. Like, what's the story of how I guess this got out?
I really don't know. I think it could just be internet sleuths for all I know, because these are like they're pretty vocally Trump
Oh,
supporters.
I see.
Ooh.
Well, I mean, I don't know. Like, I mean, like, what is there to say? Like, it's not really, I mean, you have stories like this. Stories like these are a dime a dozen, right? You have like the evangelical pastor, who preaches and rails against homosexuality, and woo, he turns out to be gay, right? Like, I mean, it just kind of feels like that, doesn't it? Right? Like, like the thing that you rail against and that you hate all the time and that you talk about, you secretly are somehow connected to and you secretly really want to do. Like, this kind of seems par for the course, doesn't it? For like a lot of like, I don't know, like right-wing media, like pundits. I mean, I'm not surprised exactly that this is like happened or that this came out. Like, what's interesting about this to you, I guess?
Oh, it's more so that they're trying to reach a different demographic on the right than that they believe they haven't been able to reach yet, and this is how they're doing it.
Oh, so that you mean they're trying to like reach out to like recovering addicts, like recovering alcoholics,
No, young women.
young women. And you think that, and they're doing this like through like, well, I mean, even that, like I've seen like, I truly don't know anything about this podcast. So it's possible that this podcast, is like better, than other podcasts that I've seen. I do know, like I've seen a version of this podcast before, but I don't know what it's called. It was these two, I think, Protestant Christian girls in Texas. They were super blonde, blue-eyed, and I'm pretty sure one of them married a gay man. They had a very fake presentation whenever they came on screen. It was kind of physically painful to watch at times, because you could kind of read between the lines. This guy just kind of wanted to escape his wife. This is kind of like what it reads to me, like two blonde Christian girls having a podcast where they try to talk about women's issues and try to involve, to talk about religion. I don't think like I've seen other versions of people trying to do this before. As far as it trying to like reach out to girls or to women, I don't know. I mean, I do think that there's kind of a new sort of brand, maybe not a new brand of feminism, but it does feel like what it is to be a feminist has changed, like from 2016. It feels like we're evolving to a more thoughtful time. And I do think that conservatism, like, I don't think that that is as synonymous with being an anti-feminist as it once used to be, at least not in the circles that I tend to run in. So you will see, of course, like these are women, and I don't know about these two women specifically, but like the kind of women I'm talking about is they are women who tend to be conservative women. They tend to be religious women. And they don't tend to be terribly pro-abortion, and they are critical of casual sex. That's definitely true. But they are progressive in other ways. And they talk about, they have anti-pornography stances. They talk about like women being taken advantage of in the industry. I've heard a lot of genuinely deep and thoughtful ideas from these women about marriage and about relationships. Like it's kind of like, Hillary Crowder.
Mm-hmm.
like Hillary Crowder, like she's like, that's the kind of like tilt I'm talking about, right? Like she's definitely a conservative woman, a conservative religious woman, but she talks about domestic violence, she talks about abuse, she talks about how to stand up for yourself, she talks about empowerment as a woman from a conservative Christian lens, right? And I think that there's a kind of sort of soft push towards this type of feminism from women like Hillary Crowder. Now, I'll grant you, it's not, it's not the kind of, like feminism that we think about, like when you hear the term, but I think it's a feminist impulse in its own right, though.
I sent you a picture as well of them on the campaign trail.
Let me see. On the campaign trail.
Yikes.
Yeah, are they MAGA girlies? Yeah. I
Yes,
mean,
they
that's also
are.
not a surprise. Yes, the MAGA babes. Okay, good for them. Yeah, I mean, it's a thing. Like I'm not surprised, it be how it be. I will say too, I think that going forward, I mean, I think that a couple of things are happening. One of the things I think that's going to change is I think that leftist populism, I think that that's probably going to be more popular as like we push forward. I would suspect that maybe not Bernie Sanders exactly, maybe not specifically AOC, but I think that politicians like them will probably become more popular as time goes on because populism is something that seems to be sweeping, right? Yeah, no, think about like who is the number one political streamer in the world? It's not Destiny. Sorry, he may have been the person that cleared the way, but the person dominating the views, that's Hassan, right? Hassan is the person that like is the most popular one. Like, and like it's not just because he's it's not just because he comes from money, and it's not just because it's because he represents a version of being a liberal, not liberal, but like a left-leaning person, right? That is appealing, right? And it's not just because he lifts weights, and it's not just because he has cute girls. It's because he represents populism. Populism is something that I think is becoming more popular for both conservatives and for liberals. And I think that if the Democrats and if like left-leaning politics wants to push forward, I think that that's something that they're going to have to tap into. I think that old school, proper corporate Democrat politics, that's reasonable, that sells itself as being the sane version of politics, I just do not think that that's going to work. I don't think that that's going to work next time. It didn't work this last time. And I don't know if anybody else feels this way, but I don't even feel like we're just seeing this like at the electorate level. When I encounter, people that are genuinely excited about being like a left-leaning person, most of those people aren't standard liberals, okay? Most of those people that I meet that are excited about being a left-leaning person, they talk about socialist politics. They are more of a leftist sort of archetype of person. I think that's what's going to excite people. I don't think that I think it's either I think even Econo Boy said this, like when he was asked about like what the Democrat Party could have done differently in order to try to succeed. And he said it should have been a leftist populist movement. And I think he was right about that. It should have focused on the economy. It should have focused about like helping the working class. It should have been heavy critiques of billionaires and of companies. Like that's like what the message should have been, right? And I think he was accurate in saying that. And I think that probably going forward, I think that's probably what we're going to see. But I don't know, what do I know?
I would love to have this conversation. I'm kind of out of time, but I'm actually on the exact opposite of this. I think if the left or if the Democrats had actually tried to put for a populist left messaging on this last one, they would have got completely fucking blown out.
They would have lost even harder. Socialism is not going to be a thing in this country.
It's not even the whole socialism thing. It's for me, looking at this is that the further left comes off to the vast majority of Americans as deranged. And ironically, I'm going to use your own like citation against you here. Like Hassan might be popular in some regards, but if you don't like Hassan, or sorry, if you are not one of the people who likes Hassan, you probably fucking hate his guts if you know anything about him. Because he's a complete and utter shitlord. Now granted, there's shitlords all about.
That would be me.
There's a lot of shitlords out there. I'm not going to act like anyone's like significantly better. But the problem I'm considering is that I think two things. Number one is that left-wing populism has become incredibly unpopular. At the same time, is that usually in this country, we have a somewhat revolutionary or like a major party that is populist that tries to push for change, and you have one that's generally quote unquote conservative that tries to maintain some level of status quo and tries to run all the shit. Let's be real. The party that is, pushing for like revolutionary change and upsetting the status quo is the Republican Party. They're more radical. They're more engaged in basically breaking anything that is normal. And the Democrats are the ones who are playing defense. And I'm kind of the idea that there's going to be a reckoning within the Democrats where the people who are writing all the checks and the people who are actually making the Democratic Party run is going to continue looking at the people who they're in bed with and just say, no, we don't like you anymore. I think we saw that a little bit under Kamala, is that they were pushing back against the pro-Palestine movement because they know it's radio fucking active.
I mean, that was pretty much
Okay,
what I
well, I mean, when I'm thinking about like, and this I'm paraphrasing from memory. Okay, I can't remember everything that was on the thing, but I think if I recall the big things that made like the Republicans lose, like the big reasons, like why not lose, excuse me, win. One was the economy. That was the number one thing I think that like Americans like were sold on. Like that's the biggest reason. If I'm not mistaken, I think that's the biggest reason.
It's the number one reason every election, so it's kind of wild. But yes,
well,
sorry.
Yeah, right. But I remember distinctly at the time, people were complaining about the price of eggs, right? People were complaining about a higher cost of living. I know that was something. I know that's obviously the number one issue. Immigration was something that people cared about. If you're somebody that cared about immigration, Trump was your guy, right? That was like one of the biggest reasons, like why Trump. And Kamala Harris didn't do a good job of managing immigration at the border. This did not help her like when she was running. I don't think the fact, like what I'm saying here about populism, it's not just the aesthetic, it's also the fact that, you have Trump, tons of, he's been in court, he's been in and out of court tons of times, the media is constantly talking and complaining about him all the time. And meanwhile, and yet somehow, despite everybody despising him, he has risen up through the party and he was the person who was selected like by the Republican Party to go ahead and run for them. Whether you think that's good or not is a different conversation, right? Compare that to Kamala Harris, right? Biden, being frail and gaining dementia, and that becoming blatantly obvious to the American people towards the last running stretch of the election. And then Kamala Harris being selected, right, basically to replace him instead of like having to run in the primary. Like I even said at the time, like, and I'll take responsibility because I said, no, you shouldn't make them. I think I even remember saying this like myself at the time that it wasn't. But this was before, I guess I realized that the Democratic Party was lying, about the aptitude of Biden to the extent that they had. I remember feeling actually shocked when I saw him hop on television. And so because this is the metric by which we receive these candidates, right? What I'm saying about the populism thing as opposed to old party establishment politics, this is like clearly like the metric by which each of these candidates were chosen. And I'm sorry, but like that is not like what the American people wanted. And like we kind of touched on it earlier, it does matter to be entertaining. It does matter to be in touch with what people want, not just what people need, not just what we think is the reasonable thing for people, but to give people something that they can genuinely root for as who you are, right? I don't think anybody ever got that feeling from Kamala like when she was running. Nobody really knew like what it was that she stood for. Yeah. I think if you're a left-leaning person, okay, let me put it to you this way. When October 7th happened a few years ago, I think that it was probably far more popular and people were far more understanding of being pro-Israel. Even me, that was true, right? Like when it first happened and people were talking about like the rapes, people were talking about like what happened like at the, but all the things that happened, people were very sympathetic, right? But it's not October 7th anymore, right? I'm sorry, we are years away from that. We are living in a different world now we were living in a different world, even like this past like November, like when the election happened. We're now living in a world where it's a legitimate concern about like Palestinians like being wiped off the face of the earth, you know? And I'm not sure we're really living in the same reality as like we were like over a few years ago. And for this reason, you know, a lot of people, like if you're a left-leaning person, you're right that the pro-Palestine thing was radioactive, but it made a lot of people sit home. It made a lot of people not want to come out for Kamala Harris. It made a lot of people from the younger demographic not want to be supportive of her. And, you know, I think that, I mean, that was a problem.
I agree. I've got a couple of different thoughts, and some of it I agree with, some of it I don't. This is the problem with where the left has been for a long time. It's been a big tent party. And so a lot of the times they've kind of had to fight over some of these issues, particularly when they were core, you know, more core issues to like the moral center of the party. And this hampers. And when it came down to this run, I think there's some level that the left does talk about where, yeah, they had a conversation between pushing out the more radical left elements who would support Palestine versus the more like establishment elements that would either say like, hey, look, we're not taking sides, or actually we're pro-Israel. And I do think that costed votes, but I'm kind of in the same camp here. I think me and Connor have had this conversation where if we had seen a left that had openly supported the Palestinian cause, we both wouldn't have voted for Kamala. And I know quite a few others that are in that camp as well, where that would have been the issue to drive people away. And I state this not because I want to shit on somebody for being pro-Palestine, but it's the Democrats are bleeding voters, which is not a good thing for them because they already need more voters just to show up. But also in the regard that a lot of their issues, when they have to fight about them, they're radioactive not just to the general public, they're radioactive within the party. And I think we're kind of figuring this out, is that in a lot of ways where the Republicans had to slim down in order to like get one central message across, we're seeing the Democrats needing to do that now. I just was hoping they had one more round before they had to go through this shit, where the Democrats have to just openly announce what kind of party they are. And I don't see the populist left winning at the same time that the populist right is in the ascendant and the establishment has nowhere to go if that's the case. I think the establishment is going to drop literally $2 billion into the next election cycle to make sure that the Democrats can hold ground.
What do you think, Twisted? Do you think that a leftist populist party is our future or not? What do you think?
He's going to be very biased in that.
Hell no. Pretty simple. I'm not a Trump voter, but I'm right wing. There is no way in hell I want to see anything like that.
Well, nobody's saying whether they want that. Like we're saying, like
I don't know. I don't think that is. No, I don't. I really don't. I don't think. I think in the online space, the whole concept of left wing socialism, blah blah blah, it sounds wonderful in the online space to the leftists. That's not reality. This country is nowhere near wanting to go anything with going down that socialist road. That movement is not large enough in this country.
I'll make it completely different.
Down, in the future, in 100 years, that may change, but right now, absolutely not.
I'll make it go ahead. Sorry.
Well, like imagine I think part of it is that we're reacting kind of to the aesthetic of like what we think of when we say like a socialist, leftist, populist kind of a guy, somebody that's kind of zany, but like, what about like an FDR kind of a guy, right? Like imagine if instead of...
I don't think he would fly today. I really don't.
You don't think so?
Nope.
Really? You don't think so? Like in the 2024 election, really?
No.
Like, why not?
I don't think. I think a JFK would have flown.
Like why not FDR though? Like
far too many far left policies.
I will
most
back
people
him.
In this country don't want bigger government, more taxes taken out of their pocket when they're already stretching to to try and buy homes, blah, 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 right? That everybody talks about. And you want to say, here, government, have more of my money. It's not going to fly.
Well,
I'll take it.
I only.
I'm sorry. I want to hit this real quick. Even though Franklin is easily like my fifth like best president in U.S. history, I don't think he could fly today either. And it's not for the exact same reasons that he was stating. It's that it took an economic disaster for someone like him to be put in office. And as bad as things have gotten, over the last couple of years, unless literally the tariffs bring back another like Great Recession, I don't see the American people going for it, because this is the part that I wanted to argue. I really believe that the Democratic Party, the core people who actually show up and write the checks and actually go to the meetings, are not these like leftist types that want major economic change. They're HOA people. These are the actual folks who are now running this party. It's people who are HR managers and people who are, lost train of thought. HR managers, people who are actually running businesses. It's not like corporate boards, but the people who are the mid-level administration and the folks who are literally those who want to sign up for an HOA because it protects their property, values. Like, this is the core of the people that we saw in the last election who wanted to vote Democrat. Those weren't the people they bled off.
Right, but I'm not really talking about like old school die blue or go home Democrats. Like I'm talking about, and I'm also not talking, by the way, about like people that are like hardcore committed conservatives either. I'm talking about the big pool of people that did not wind up going to the polls at all. Right, the people that did not want to vote, and which is part of like a lot of the moderates decided to like opt out of this particular election. Right, and I would agree with you that the people that are writing the checks, you're going to have some old school, like dependable people that are going to go, sure, right? Of course. But that's not really who we're talking about. We have to appeal to the people, like to this middle group of people in the bell curve, right? How are you going to get those people to want to go to the booth to vote for what you want, right? And I think that
you need better candidates on both sides, right? Kamala was a horrible candidate, and then you had Trump. Come on. Nobody's going to get excited about either of those people, right?
Well, I mean, honestly,
I won't say nobody. A lot of people did get excited for Trump, but when I went and voted, I didn't vote for either of them. I wasn't going to vote for Kamala. That's for damn sure. And I wasn't going to vote for Trump. That's for damn sure too. I'm not going to vote for a man who already called to violate the Constitution before the goddamn election, right? So I voted for Chase Oliver. It was a throwaway vote, but that was, that was what I felt like I had to do, because I couldn't push the button for either of those idiots.
Yeah.
Principled conservatism. Gotta love it.
Yeah. And I think that might have been, and I think that's true for a lot of people, Twisted, but I also think that for a lot of people, look, this is the first time the Republican Party has like won the popular vote in years. Okay, they won the popular vote. They not only were they elected, they got. Am I wrong for thinking they got the House and the Senate and the presidency and the popular vote? Like that's you can't just say like, yeah, they won. That was a huge red landslide, right? Like there might be like a lot of traditional conservatives who hated, who didn't like Trump, who didn't like. I accept that that's true, right? But this kind of result, that very much does indicate that there was like a swell of people who did very much like Trump and who did very much like, were excited by MAGA politics, were excited they felt like they were a part of something, right? And the reason I bring up FDR, right? And again, I'm a dumbass, like, what do I know? But from what I've heard, okay, you mentioned the Great Recession. I mean, I know a lot of people are complaining about tariffs right now. A lot of people are contemplating a possible recession in the future or a possible huge economic, downturn. If things get really bad, like let's say in the next 4 years, and let's say the Democrat Party does find like a new FDR, and I don't mean like somebody who seems zany and crazy, but I mean somebody who comes up and who suggests a lot of social welfare programs, who has a party line that talks about like helping the working class, at making billionaires like pay their fair share, and comes up with a lot of social programs in the same way that FDR did, like to try to reboot after the Great Depression. Like, this is the kind of like political like Democrat who I could see maybe being successful, right? If the Trump presidency actually, like if the Trump presidency actually does turn out to have like economic problems in the way that people are saying.
Obviously, I don't want to act like I know the future. There's a couple of questions and what ifs that definitely need to be answered going forward. But I'll kind of put it in this way: Democrats are in a world of hurt right now because, I mean, I'm going to shit on Leafy here for a minute, but most of the time I'm in the server, the only times that they actually talk about something good happening for the Democratic Party is relying upon the idea that the Republicans epically fuck up or that Trump literally crashes the economy. They're not engaged in talking about who this next big person is, who's going to, take the party and run with it. Because quite frankly, there's hardly anyone in the party to do it. But also there's like no central concrete message that everybody can get on board with. I'm being a bit of a shit here, but I'm also going to go with the level of, yes, like prerequisite. Trump probably has to crash the economy for a major Democratic victory. You're also looking at the Democratic Party just pulling a red ringer out of their ass, which it's possible, right? But I'm going to put it in this regard. I don't expect an FDR to be this kind of guy. Granted, completely fictitious character. If the Democrats are going to win big in 28, it's probably going to be someone who resembles Jed Bartlett. Somebody who's like, oh yeah, you know why you guys vote for us? Because we're not fucking retarded. And while our growth was too slow and you didn't like how Biden was handling shit was slowly getting better. Gas was a lot cheaper in 24 than it was in 22. Stop voting against us because you don't like us. Start voting for us because we will actually make shit work. Like, that's what I expect to win for the Democrats. Like, I'm waiting for the Democrats to actually be as petty as the voters think they are. Because I think when that mask comes off, they're actually going to win.
I think it would have to be to get I don't know who you're talking about, Ty.
President of the West Wing.
Never saw it.
I'm surprised by that one, but go on.
I don't watch much TV. If I watch TV, it's usually documentaries and stuff because, like, I'm a nerd. But anyway, I don't know. I think that in order for an FDR-like character to come to the forefront, you're going to have to not only crash the economy, but crash the economy, stomp on it, shit on it, set it on fire, and then pee on it to put it out. Right? A recession ain't going to do it. It would have to, and you guys, I'm sure the Democrat or lefties are going, yeah, we need an FDR. Maybe that's, you don't want to see that shit happen. Period. End of story. It would be, it would have to be something on the scale of the Depression, not the Great Depression, not the 2028 or 2008 recession, right? Big difference. You're not going to see an FDR come out of a recession. That's a short-term downturn on the market. The markets are always going to recover, right? That's what, I don't like Trump. I don't like his policies. But in 3 years, he's out of there, if not sooner, if he keels over from a heart attack.
Yeah.
But I don't see these kind of policies continuing beyond the Trump administration. So you might have a recession. You might have a shit economy for the next few years. But I don't see it plunging into a full-blown Great Depression type thing. I don't see the future. I can't predict the future either. That's just what I am guessing at this point.
Do you think that the best chance the Democrats have is to have an establishment like person come back up, or you don't think that like a leftist populist like person is the kind of person that could take the party?
I don't think, I don't think I think Trump is an outlier in a right populist. I think that both parties need to come more back toward the moderate center instead of continuing to diverge in more extreme left, more extreme right. If it does continue down that path, that may be the time that we see a viable third party pop up, right? Maybe the libertarians pop up. Who knows? But it needs to be, to me, we need to bring back to the middle. And I know in this space, everybody says, well, American left is the right. Yeah, well, you know what? I don't give a flying fuck about what the rest of the world does. We're looking at the American politics through an American lens. Period. End of story.
Final thought, and then I gotta bounce. Taking the party versus taking the country is two different things, and we're kind of getting into this point where both parties are trying to like slow radicalize, and they're clearly alienating people. Part of that was the conversation we had earlier about like the center is in some ways showing up, but they're not showing up in like massive droves, or they're very strongly splitting. You know, we almost had 2020 numbers in 2024. So like most people are showing up, but unless you're going to tap into secretly in a way that I don't know anyone knows how to do it, that other 35% of the population that doesn't fucking vote, I don't see how you're playing with anything that's not already on the board. So when it comes to the Democrats, there's a couple of people that they're talking about. Some of them make me cringe and want to die. You know, like talking about the California governor, Gavin Newsom. Please God, no.
Oh God, help us.
Yeah. Some others that I
He's
think
the left-wing Trump.
In a lot of ways, yeah. Anyway, long story short, there's a couple there that people are talking about, or at least kind of in the highlight reel, which I think some of them could do okay, but none of them that anyone's getting like huge on, right? You got Scott Kelly, who's a fucking astronaut, and he's a senator from Arizona, but on the other side of it is, you know, he's not very popular with the more leftist element. You've got Jared Polis, which kind of is able to bridge the gap between both wings of the party. He's the governor of Colorado, and he's termed out, so he's probably got a good chance to run. But that's kind of it of all the people that I think is even remotely viable. People are talking about AOC. I don't see her winning a general at all. And, you know, we're kind of pulling at straws here. I still think my original 2016 run, or 2020 run, should throw his hat in the ring, and that's Joe Kennedy III, because he's establishment politics, but also decently progressive in ways that people need to be. If he actually threw in for it, he might have a shot, but just the problem with the Democrats, and granted, we'll see what happens during the primary season, because, you know, there's plenty of people who can come into this joint, is they don't have a dead ringer. They don't even have anyone who's kind of in the lower echelons who really gets a third of the party excited at a given time. It's just everyone has their little camp, and everyone has their little guy that they want to put up, but the rest of the party hates them. Or doesn't.
The reality is neither party has a leader. There's no leadership in our politics anymore. When's the last time we had a president? When's the last time we had a president that was actually a leader?
By my standard, or by just the politics standard?
By your standard, which is probably similar to mine.
By our standard, the last leader that we had in this country, ironically enough, was the greatest president this country ever had, and it was Eisenhower.
I personally would say, even though he was a Democrat, would be JFK.
He was a terrible leader. The fucking Senate hated his guts.
He was great.
The Bay of Pigs called it.
Well, We'll fight that one later. Kennedy is way overrated and is actually a terrible president.
Yeah, we can fight that one later. I think
Like LBJ was actually a way more successful president, but like even if you're talking about mild leader, I mean the last that you can throw out is either Obama, which crashed the Democratic Party, in the long term, and then you're talking about like Reagan, which everything that he believed in came back to bite us.
Yeah,
like Trump is the antithesis of Reagan, and it's weird that nobody talks about that, but whatever. Anyway, just kind of wrapping this up. FQ, just because we haven't talked in a long time, how's the fur babies?
Sure. Oh, she's doing okay. She's actually rubbing on my toes right now. She's so cute. Oh, I love her. No, she's okay. My kitty and my doggo are both doing very, very fine. Thank you for asking.
Yeah, no problem. I actually picked up a kitty not too terribly long ago. Oh crap, this doesn't have a lot of room.
Really?
Yeah, I guess we can't really see her there very well. Give me a second to see if I can get her to coax over here real quick.
Aw.
I have a tabby cat now, and it's great.
Oh, you do? Did I tell you I got a puppy?
No, you didn't.
Did you really?
Yeah, I got a Belgian Malinois.
Oh,
Oh,
wow.
that's so cute.
Yep, my Maligator.
Come on.
I've,
Come here.
Buddy who spent all winter while I was in Hawaii training him. He has a business training police canines. So my pup is trained very well.
Aw.
But he goes on all my chases with me. He loves storms, loves riding in the truck. It's great. Oh.
This is Rhea. She's still
Aw.
kitten. She's about 7 months old.
Very cute.
Yeah, she's adorable. I got some great pictures. I'll send some to you if you want them.
Yeah, no, for sure. And she's very cute. And Twisted, that's awesome. I bet your puppy has a lot of fun. I hope he doesn't get blown away, though, like the Wizard of Oz, okay? I wouldn't want him to be like Toto, okay? The yellow brick road is no place for the puppy, okay?
Very true, very true.
All right, I'm 30 minutes over my bedtime.
It does make it harder, though, to find hotels that allow pets, but, it is what it is.
On that note, I guess I should probably write out either way. I think it was a good conversation, and thank you, FairyQueen, for coming through. If you want to plug yourself.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me on.
And let people know where to find you and about your wonderful Twitter posts.
Yeah. If you guys want to see me rant and rave on Twitter, go ahead and give me a follow. I'll drop it here in chat. Please consider giving me a follow. Thank you so much. I like to rant and rave on Twitter. If you want to argue with me, we can yell on stream. Let me know, okay? Thank you, guys.
Been a blast. So, all right, we're going to right into Irrelevant. And thank you all for being here. And hopefully catch you guys next Wednesday. I will see who wants to have a chat. Setting up the raid. And catch y'all next week. Deuces.
There y'all.
It's too late, Nair.
Bye, Leafy. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for coming through. Yeah. I'm truly glad I got to have you on. Like, I already knew you were going to be awesome.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, no, thank you for having me on.